Community Redevelopment Board held on this day, September 12th, 2019, is now in session. Do we have invocation, Councilman Miranda?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, this morning the presenter to introduce the individual doing the presentation for the morning prayer, Mr. Johnson, is going to introduce our good friend and
Good morning, CRA Board. Ed Johnson, CRA Manager for East Tampa. It's an honor for me this morning to introduce a friend and real boots-on-the-ground doer in the East Tampa CRA this morning, Brother Daniel John Dean Sr. At the age of 9, Brother Dean moved from his native country of Jamaica to Miami, Florida, and it is there where he received his formal public education. Prior to moving to Tampa in 1999, Pastor Dean became familiar with most aspects of construction while working for his family's business. After moving to Tampa, he established 2 501c3 nonprofit organizations. Through Project Now, where community outreach is addressed, through affordable housing construction, GED preparation, mentoring, and 2 community centers, housing a private school in one and a charter school and a neighborhood association office in the other. The other nonprofit, Bible Truth Ministries, provides multiple services to the community and where the church is located. Educational programs are available through this organization during the day and after school. Brother Dean has dedicated much of his life in the service to others. He seeks a more fair and just society for all people. So help me welcome this morning a true friend of community engagement and redevelopment, Brother Daniel Dean.
Please rise for the invocation. Remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
How's everyone doing this morning? Recognize everyone in their respectful places. If you don't mind, would you please bow your head? Father, we thank you for your goodness. We thank you for your mercy. We thank you for your grace. And we thank you for your wisdom. I ask, O Lord, that wisdom will be exhibited today, O Lord, as they discuss the affairs of the community, the both rich and poor, those needs that are necessary in order to move this city and the community forward. Help us, O God, to put ourselves aside and put purpose before you, that your will be done not only in our lives, but in our community at large. And for this I thank you. Amen.
Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Dingfelder, Goods,
Here.
Maniscalco, Vieira, Miranda,
Here.
Carlson,
Here.
and Citro.
Here. Before we start, Councilman Goods, you would like to make a comment?
Pastor Dean, come on to the podium, sir. I've known you for quite a while now, sir, and I want to thank you for what you're trying to do out in the East Tampa area.
Thank you.
A lot of people don't understand what it is that you're trying to do, but I understand. You're trying to make a way of difference for the folks in that community, especially on 29th and Lake, especially up on 22nd by Middleton High School and on 34th and Chelsea. So you keep on doing what you're doing, sir, and I want to be a person that you can rely on at any time you call. Can you do that for me, sir?
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Board members, without objection, I would like to move agenda item number 3 and combine it with item agenda number 10. As- Okay. No?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you very, very much, board members.
Is that combining it with the walk-on that Ms. Elman sent us?
Ms. Zellman, that's not necessarily true, but however, if you'd like to chime in about that?
Or we can talk about it afterwards.
Yes, the resolution that we provided can be addressed with agenda item 10. It was embedded in agenda item, 5. And we just separated it out as a separate resolution, but that will come up with agenda item number 5.
Thank you.
All right, we have a report coming from the downtown, channel side, excuse me. Nicholas, are you ready to give us your report today?
So Nick Buchanan, I'm the chair of the Channelside CRA. I've been there, I think, for about 4 years. And nice to be up here to address you guys for the first time. And I'll just give my monthly report. Some of it exciting, some of it's, underground things. So the Channelside Drive project team submitted 90% of the construction documents to the city to review by the end of September. And that's all of Channelside Drive on the aquarium side. So we're excited to see that and how that's going to change. The Liberty Group held a grand opening for the Hampton Inn and Homewood 2 Suites at the corner of Meridian and Kennedy, and also not to forget that we got a Starbucks, so we're all very excited about that. The Publix had a grand opening August 29th, so hopefully you guys have all been down there, and it's a great asset to be able to walk and grab some groceries and grab some lunch. Sparkman Wharf is fully underway in all its renovations and has lots of activities planned. I just saw some stuff on Facebook, so they're getting ready to amp up some of their fall activities. And let's see, we have a few parcels left in the Channel District, and so we're starting to see some more interest from developers coming in and working on those projects. So we'll kind of see who comes in front of us, give us their ideas, and we can give them the recommendations. And let's see. And then Mercury Advisors, the developer of Elevate 61, is in the process of permitting their corner, so hopefully we start seeing that going up pretty soon. And let's see, I think that's about it. So if you guys have any questions?
Any questions?
All right, thank you.
Hang on one second.
okay.
Hang on one second. Do you have any idea of what the traffic is for the new Publix?
As far as like statistics,
Just ballpark, offhand?
I mean, I'm there about 2 or 3 times a week because my office is right there. So you definitely see a lot of the lunch traffic. That's the traffic that I see. And then, a lot of residents coming out of there with a grocery bag. So it seems pretty busy to me. So, but we can find out some statistics. for you.
Fantastic. I'm hoping that residents in Ybor City are taking our wonderful streetcar there and getting their
Hopefully.
groceries and going home. Maybe I'll hear from Miss Courtney Orr later on about that. Thank you, Nicholas.
All right, you're welcome.
Chief Bennett. I still call you chief.
It's okay. It seems to follow it so far. Good morning, Board. John Bennett, Chief of Staff, City of Tampa. Chairman, are you ready for item 2, or are you?
Yes, let's talk about item 2, please.
So just as a prelude to kind of a recommendation of change of order, is that we're asking the CRA staff to present individually from here on out, if that's the will of the board, to better develop communication with each of you and increase our accountability to the community, which is why we're here to serve in the first place. So instead of me coming up and monologuing about the areas, they're going to come up for a recommended time of 3 minutes or less and give you the updates on each of the CRAs, and that'll give you a better chance to engage staff one-on-one. Is that acceptable?
Then let me ask the board members. Board members, do we have any objection to CRA members giving a brief statement on behalf of their districts? Good. Go ahead.
Tell me if this is not the right place, but when we get into a longer discussion, I want to talk about reporting and accountability. But one of the things that I've been looking at is, and I've talked about it a couple times, is correlation. So a lot of the things that have been reported to us as happening in the CRA, like Publix, the last time whoever was presenting it presented Publix, and I asked, was that a project that was subsidized by the CRA? And the answer was no. Traditionally, from the few months that I've been here, in the report that we get, most of the projects that are listed may have indirectly developed because of CRA investments, but they're not direct investments in the CRA.
Sure.
And maybe my colleagues would disagree, but what I would really appreciate is a separate, and this is no criticism of what Nick presented or anything else, but what I would like to see is a listing of what the CRA projects are, what's the CRA investing in, or what's successful that the CRA is invested in, and then if in a separate section, to list what's happening in that district. Is there something that may or may not be connected to it, but what are the things that we're really doing? What is it that we're having an impact on? What do you all?
I agree also, but at this time, I believe what Chief Bennett is trying to move forward in is each CRA at this time, just give us a brief overview of what has happened within the CRA or CAC's areas since the last time we met.
And that's correct for this meeting, but to Board Member Carlson's point, we're hoping we can build a stronger methodology to bring you back the information that you're asking in that level, and but still present in the same style by individual CRA manager.
Yeah, I think that, to me, more information is better, so I would love to have more information.
That's
I'm
what we're
trying
here
attend
for,
some
is to
of these.
communicate. So
The other
with
thing-
that, we will, unless you're finished.
No, the other thing, and we can talk about this when we get to item 3 and 10, but I went through the enabling legislation last time and also the grand jury report, and it says that the purpose of CRA is slum blight and affordable housing. And I think we need to go through some kind of strategic planning exercise as a board, but it would be good if also whatever we're investing in is grouped into those categories so that we can show the public that we are investing in what we're supposed to be investing in. But that can be a conversation later.
Yeah, and I think maybe when we get to the combined item, we can talk more about that as well. But I don't think anybody disagrees with more accountability and awareness to what we're doing in the community.
Thank you.
Chief, would you like to orchestrate this?
Well, they have their order, so they'll come up in presentation order, and we'll give, if it's okay with you, 3 minutes each or less.
Any objections? Councilman Digfelder.
Just from a process perspective, Mr. Chairman, should we ask questions at each district, or would you prefer waiting till the end?
I think that should be discretionary to the board members.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Rob Rosner, Urban Development Manager for Downtown Chandler District, Central Park, and Tampa Heights Riverfront. I'll start with the Downtown CRA. To your point, we've had a number of projects that have been completed and are underway. First, we've completed the Big Race Fish Camp and Sail Plaza development that was part of the Convention Center renovations that was supported by the CRA. They had their grand opening on the 22nd. It was very successful. We were very happy. Got a lot of compliments for that. AER Tower is moving forward. Obviously, the CRA is involved in that as well. You'll see that item on number 9. Tyler Residences and Domino's site, we have 4 people in this deal right now where we're building Herman Massey Park. We're working out the development agreement for Harrison Street. That's part of Spring Hill Suites. Domino's site's part of that. And then the TICO improvements that go along with that. As I mentioned, Herman Massey Park, the consultants are working on 90% plans right now. We're giving them comments, so that is intended to come this spring. Other developments that are coming out of the ground, like 815 Water Street, they're continuing to climb. The Water Street Tampa infrastructure is going along with that. They're in phase 1, stage 3 at this time, which is the rerouting of Channelside Drive and the other roadway work that goes along with that. Before I move on to any others, do you have questions for downtown?
Councilman Digfelder.
Goods was up first. Good.
Councilman Goods.
I just want to see, last time we talked, I asked for you to look into getting with the CAC board in reference to Kid Mason
Yes.
Playground. Can you give me an update on that?
Yes. We met with Brad Suter of the Parks Department, and we met with the staff at the facility and looked through that and identified a number of items that could be renovated or added to that to improve its quality and the use of that. Currently, it's being used as a after-school program, but there was a desire and there's a lot of requests for evening events for the community. So we made a number of identified a number of different things that could be done there, and Brad Suter's following up with that.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Councilman Digfelder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Rob. On your report, it says prepare land sale agreement with Spring Hill Suites for East Harrison Street in process. I don't know if I'm familiar with that project. Is that city land?
Yes. So in 2009, there was an agreement that the northern parcel, The former Harrison Street was very narrow, and the Domino site was all under contract in 2009. That was a developer's agreement that died on the vine because of the economy. Another landowner came by, bought the property, wants to execute that. And in order to get the hotel to work, we were going to open up Harrison Street again so they could have the proper access. Well, there's a little bit of land sale that goes in that to get the proper width of the right-of-way. That's part of what that is. So that's what that's referring to.
And who owns the land, the city or the CRA?
The city owns it.
Okay. And is there a dollar amount associated with that coming from the developer?
No, on September 19th, there'll be a hearing about that agreement, and I don't have the details handy, but they were intending to use impact fees to pay for the roadway and construction, very similar to what we're doing with AER for the proceeds of the sale. That one's a little different because we're giving up right-of-way land there, but this one is based on reopening Harrison Street.
Okay. I had a bunch of questions on the Riverwalk agreement, but you're right, it is item 9, so I'll go ahead and hold off on that. The only other question I have in regard to downtown, it says, begin process of advertising the new facade program for downtown CRA. The board had some questions and concerns about the facade program specifically as related to downtown a couple months ago. Were you here for that?
I was. It's just a general thought of if we're going to continue with it, then we would want to put that in the plan to advertise.
Well, I think that's a question for this body. Is downtown the place that we want to do facades? Or we're always up for more, better facades. The question is, do we want to fund those, especially to perhaps wealthy property owners?
Well, this was brought forth by our CAC and asked to do that. So we're happy to make any modifications you want to do with that. And with the intent of, it was passed before and our plan was to advertise it. That was why that was in
Mr.
there.
Chairman, does the board have any other thoughts on that other than me? On the facade specifically for downtown?
Oh, I'm going to vote against all of the facade grants from now on because I just think it's a waste of money. And everywhere I've gone since we've been talking about it, the public comes to me and thinks it's a waste of money. So I think there may be some instances with historic preservation that there could be historic preservation grants, but when you look at how the money could be used otherwise, I don't think it's a good use of money at all, and especially not in downtown.
Councilman Goods?
I can partially agree with you, Mr. Carlson, partially. Because in some areas, facade grants are needed to help those get over the hump. Now, I can see a downtown, a channel side, some of these areas where the incentives that we give already, we're talking about new buildings that are going up in these places. So I can see where a facade grant would not be necessary for those type facilities downtown. But when we talk about some portions of West Tampa and East Tampa, those places need help. And we have to make sure that those CAC boards understand, this board, who is the governing body of the CAC board, make sure that these things are in place to help the people. Now, I totally agree about some folks shouldn't get them, but to say I can't agree with all not being a part of a program that some places need help. So I wouldn't be in support of getting rid of it, but I would be in support of curtailing the program, but not getting rid of it, sir.
Councilman Vieira?
Sure. I mean, I agree with Councilman Goods that I think a amend it, don't end it program type of an idea, I think with facade grants works. We've seen what facade grants can do to improve communities. We've had a prior discussion. I believe you made a motion maybe last meeting, I think, about this, not just relegated to downtown, but having some, I don't want to call it means testing, but taking a look at partial means testing for some of the grants, if my memory serves me right. In other words, taking a look at the amount that a property owner has got to put forward if somebody is particularly lower income and wanting to be an aspiring entrepreneur, that the city of Tampa does more than just meet them halfway there for certain grants. That's something I would be strongly in support of. But I think that a one-shoe-fits-all type of just say no policy to facade grants is certainly not something I could support. I think that if we were to take a look at all the facade grants that have happened throughout the city, you put them collectively, there is a robust investment in blighted areas, a robust investment in areas that need help, and a robust transition for a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs to business ownership, in my opinion.
Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also agree that, you know, if you don't have facade programs, it's like me having an ugly face. I may need help. I may need the eyes put back because I'm getting of age. The buildings are of age. That's what I'm trying to make understand. And besides that, when you look at the facade programs, they're brought in by the board approval of those areas. Am I correct?
Correct.
Those areas have different boards. It ain't the owner saying, look, I want this and let me have it. They got to go through a process that is, no matter where you're at. And so it's very hard for me to say, you know, no facade programs. There's an old movie, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. How long do we want to be ugly? This city needs a springboard. When you look at areas in Drew Park, when you look areas in East Tampa, when you look areas in West Tampa, when you look other areas, and just because it's downtown doesn't mean there's not a building that needs, not all buildings in downtown are less than 10 years old. In fact, I don't know of any skyscraper that's under 20 years old, except those that are going up now. So at 20 years, you need a whitewash. 20 years, you may need a new entrance. In 20 years, you might need something. And any house that's built does not last forever unless you maintain it. And when you have neighborhoods and individuals who want to do the right thing and don't have the funds, but yet we have the mechanism for them to fix it through the board that's created by the CRA in those different districts. And they say the recommendation to this board, and it's up to us to vote yay or nay. So I'm not saying that I would not vote for facade program. I think it's needed. So I take it case by case, and that's how I stand. Thank you.
Councilman Carlson.
I think I agree with what my colleagues have said. The thing is, I think facade grant is the wrong mechanism. I mean, what we're really talking about is helping entrepreneurs, and we're changing the face of a street, but we're also helping entrepreneurs. And I think if we put that $500,000 or whatever it is into a pot and said, how best can we help entrepreneurs and alleviate blight, we might come up with different solutions. You know, what the communities are telling me is we need to help entrepreneurs in the neighborhoods. We need to not just subsidize developers from outside to come and build a lot of big buildings. We need to help entrepreneurs to build up their businesses, sustain their businesses, and in East Tampa, I just took a tour again the other day. One of the things was we need more than just beauty shops. You know, we need lots of services. We need additional services for people so they don't have to drive across town also to go get the services that they want. There are lots of models. One of them that I'm somewhat familiar with is Boston Community Capital. It's kind of similar to the CDC, but you have a partnership between government and nonprofit or private sector to invest in commercial real estate that in a way that that subsidizes or helps entrepreneurs. And I think that instead of spending all the money on facade grants, and we'll talk about this when this item comes up again, but we should look at what are the alternatives. I mean, we've got a lot of smart people in the city, and I wish someone would look at what the other alternatives are and how best we could use this money to alleviate blight, but also support our local entrepreneurs who want to build businesses.
Councilman Dingfelder.
I agree with what Councilman Good said in regard to East Tampa and West Tampa, Drew Park. I think there's been some real successes on the facades in those districts. My alarm started going off specifically on this item in regard to downtown. If anybody owns a downtown property, I mean their tax bill is higher than probably all of our mortgages put together or something. I mean, you know, so why exactly is the CRA subsidizing any part of that facade improvement? And even in Ybor City, there were 2 instances recently in Ybor City, and we let them go through, but when you look a little deeper, there's some wealthy property owners that not took advantage, but that were succeeded in going through the facade program and getting $50,000 each, and it kind of scratched my head on those as well. But anyway, I guess I just wanted to throw up the caution flag on that one, Rob.
Okay.
You've heard the board. And I think there's somewhat of some agreement in regard to downtown, you know, at least some concern about downtown. So
Thank you.
proceed cautiously.
Thank you.
Councilman Goods.
Mr. Carlson, I want to go back. I know you've been probably taking rides in my district, and I don't know who you're riding with, and I don't care who you're riding with, but I'm gonna say this. Yes, we have a lot of beauty in barbershops, but at the end of the day, those folks ain't on the street doing bad things. They're making a living. I have to speak up for those folks. I think I know my district more well than anybody you might have been riding with, because I lived there, I worked there, I put people in jail there, fed people, have youth football, cheerleading programs there. So I think I know my district better than anybody on this board. What we need is development, good development, that doesn't come there. I've got about 27, 30 retention ponds in my district. Don't understand why. I can't get an answer on that. Makes no sense. So when you talk about blight, it's like it's a circle. That's where everybody poor needs to be at. And it sickens me every day when I drive through it, because I'm there every day. I'm at the ballparks every day. When I drive to New Tampa, Mr. Chairman, I drove to your district on Saturday, because people were calling me about the youth and senior cultural enrichment center that I want to bring. Didn't understand another site plan this entire. But I drove out to your place because I knew what my vision was, and I knew what the seniors had told me on the campaign trail and the people. When I go out there and I see the young girls in small tots in there doing ballet and dance, and I see a gymnastic portion in there, and you got a new section that's being built. Then I go down the street to Wayne Pappy, and I see all the parents, single moms, a lot of them, out there with the young girls. Again, a smaller setting of a gymnasium style, but not a gym, a gymnasium style for gymnastics. I see scholarship for kids. I see ballet with dance recitals that we don't have in my district. So that's why I fight so hard for the small things. We got other needs in our district, other parks that need to be dealt with, but right now there's a need for a bigger scope for the kids in our community and our seniors. So I want you to understand that I know you see a lot of beauty shops, but that's been paying the bills a long time, sir.
Yeah, if I could just respond. First of all, you're absolutely expert on your district, and unfortunately, because of sunshine, we can't go on. You can't give me a tour, but I'm learning through you here, and you know, trying to learn as much as I can about the whole city, not just your district. The point about beauty shops, and I have friends who own beauty shops too, and so it's not a point against that. The point is that people want services that are not easily available, and they shouldn't have to drive across town to go to services that other districts have. And so I think you know, the more we can, you know this better than I, but the more we can look to try to get people throughout the city services that they need, so they don't have to drive all the way across town, it will not only help the neighborhoods, but it will help with traffic problems and other issues. But thank you.
Any other statements? And if I may, board, I don't want to talk about beauty parlors. I have to go to work at one of those just 4 days out of the week. As to Mr. Carlson's point, my belief is that I should be looking at these facade grants individually. And the way I have seen facade grants work, excuse me, Mr. Teeth, Mr. Tongue, Mr. Lips are not working in sync. It goes from community to committees to boards and then comes to us. The facade grants are just not free money. There's a part that the owner has to come up with and matching by the facade grants. As far as downtown goes, there is a 120-year building down the street that can't afford to point its bricks, but they have enough money for half. I'd much rather, instead of a blanket statement with bias saying I'm not giving any facade grants, hear each case individually that is presented to us by the CACs and the CRAs. And sometimes there are buildings in areas of town that we think are the richest areas that still need help. it's a domino effect. You have one building that gets fixed, and with a big sign out front that says, "See your CRA tax dollars hard at work," maybe the building next door. And little by little by little, each neighborhood, each CRA, each CAC sees redevelopment. That's my final word on it. Anything else, Mr. Rosner?
I have two other reports to give.
Proceed.
Okay, so Channel District, Ms. Nicholas gave a good report on that. To answer the questions that Mr. Carlson had about hearing more specific projects, we are starting the first of the 9 projects in the Channel District. Please visit channeldistrictprojects.com. Tonight, we'll be having our public meeting for starting the 12th Street Segment C. We'll be meeting with each of the property owners and talking to them about road closures and all the things that they're going to be in. We engaged a group to help us with that, and that's what we're doing tonight for public meeting. In the rest and down in Channel District, we are on the 90% plants. We've been meeting with all the stakeholders, the port, HART. We have another meeting with the Florida Aquarium to make sure everything's right in the way we wanted to have that redeveloped. Do you have any questions for Channel District?
Councilman Digfelder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Had the opportunity to attend the Channel District meeting last night. It was a good, robust discussion on various issues, some of which Rob has touched on today. One issue that came up rather strenuously that apparently has been brewing there for a while is the issue of FARs, floor area ratios. Years ago, council, when Channel District was first starting out, as everybody recalls, it was supposed to be a little warehouse district, 4 stories, lofts and that sort of thing. And then a couple of high-rises got approved, and all of a sudden it became more of a high-rise district, kind of an extension of downtown, and now SPP is filling in between, and all, that's fine. That's just sort of history and what happened. But from a zoning perspective, what also happened was there was a floor area ratio limitation in Channelside as related to the original concept. I'll call it the Linda Salsena concept, which was very valid, but ultimately didn't happen. And that floor area limitation has now constrained some of the projects that the residents and the property owners down there want to see happen. So this isn't exactly a CRA issue, but I wanted to mention it because the CRA board mentioned it when I was there last night, and they actually asked me to bring it up. That they want to be free of those FAR limitations the same way that downtown is. They want to be on the equal footing as downtown. If they've got an acre of land, they want to go as high and dense as possible with the maximum number of people. And interestingly enough, the other residents down there who are not the property owners are gung-ho about it because they want more bodies down there too. Because the more bodies down there, the more activities, the more vibrance, et cetera, it will be more of an urban environment that they want. So I'm just bringing it up as sort of as an FYI. I asked them to go ahead and take a vote on that and put it in writing to council, not the CRA, so we could address it as a zoning issue. So that's just an FYI to the board.
Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Roger, before you go, at our next CRA, make sure we have an update on the process of Kid Mason. I'm getting calls on that, and I want to make sure we can give some kind of progress of where we're at in that phase. That's very important to me as well. It's a blighted area in the downtown area. I know the downtown area has funds to be able to help, and I'm hoping to see. I see the CAC board is, I guess you're saying, starting to move that way, and that's what we need to happen. And that's going to be a great thing if we can get that project done sooner than later for those kids in that community right there. I think it'll be a great benefit because really there's nothing really there for them. Even if you're at the Central Park across the street, so those kids over there can cross that street. They come right there to Kid Mason and have a good place to go. Gentlemen, if you have not been there, I implore you to go down there and look at that facility. And you'll be stunned on how the city has let that area down, have seriously let that community center down. It looks like a prison down there.
Thank you. I'll be happy to give you that update.
Thank you.
Welcome. For Tampa Heights Riverfront, we have a new Riverwalk venue called Stone's Throw. They opened up in late July. If you get a chance, they're right there on the water, very similar to the Sail down at the Convention Center. They're at Oyster Bar. If you get a chance to enjoy that. They also announced the new Sprouts Grocery as part of their redevelopment. They are still in the process of doing the 2 roundabouts for Palm Avenue. That's part of the master plan for that, and they're still working that out from their phasing. And that's what we have for Tampa Heights.
Councilman Carl.
You mentioned the restaurant, I forgot what it's called, Stone's Throw or
Stone's
something,
Throw.
and then you also mentioned the sale, and previously you mentioned the restaurants at the convention center. In those cases, did the CRA directly subsidize the restaurants, or in the case of the convention center, was it the convention center subsidy that indirectly affected it, and then on Stone's Throw, did we directly?
No, Stone's Throw was all on its own. That was part of their development plan. At the sale, the site work and the other work that was related to the Riverwalk was the CRA's contribution. Aramark built the building, and then the concessions and the other pieces were through the TDC money.
And so the buildings were, the money for the buildings were paid for by the CRA, or just the Riverwalk area around it?
The related Riverwalk and utilities and the public infrastructure that was needed to make that space what it is. If you recall what it was a large grassy area that was used, and we confirmed that, transformed that into a nice civic space. But there was an Aramark contract that the convention center had for them to provide those facilities. Be happy to share that information with
Yeah,
you.
thank you, and sorry to keep I'll stop asking so many questions, but I think for the public especially, it's important to know what we're funding, and what we're directly impacting versus what we may be indirectly impacting, and because I'm getting a lot of questions about making sure that we're spending money the right way, and so I just want to make sure that we all know, and the public's watching on TV, so I wanted them to know as well. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman Good.
Well, again, another CRA that's in my district. And Mr. Carlson, you're right. A lot of people are wondering, private NCRE dollars. But my question is, we made a special provision for the Tampa Heights area for the CRA. But I need to know how many minority businesses are down there, are sparking up down there, if any.
Don't have that handy, but I could get that for you.
We need to know that, because if we have made a special CRA and we've got all this development going on, I need to know what kind of provisions for minority businesses, what's going on down there. We've got apartments going up. What is the ratio of mixed level incomes or housing in that area? I grew up 2 blocks north of Palm on Park Avenue. So that area was a heavily affluent African American community. And it's transition. We have these transitions that come, but I want to make sure that others still have an opportunity to come back to their homes and be business owners or be able to live in that area. So if you can give me some information on it, it'd be greatly appreciated.
Sure, be happy to do that. Any other questions for Tampa Heights? Central Park, we're just getting started again. We finally got a committee that has been able to form a quorum, and so we've had some good discussions. And they're interested in help funding the Meacham Community Garden that is intended to be built by the Housing Authority. So we're working with them. We've formed a subcommittee to gather folks from the community and reach out to Tampa Heights Community Garden for some guidance of how they started. So they're actively engaged and wanting to be actively involved with Central Park. And that's the end of my report.
Anything else? Rob, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Happy to do it.
Good morning, Courtney Orr, CRA Manager for Ybor City. The most important thing we've been working on this past year has been the Vision Plan 2020, working with VHB and the Planning Commission, and we are set to bring that to you hopefully in October or November for final approval. We've had a lot of community engagement through that planning process, and so we feel like we've captured a lot of the community's interest in the plan. So we'll bring that final presentation to you in the next month or two, and then we will have a 5-year strategic action plan to follow. And one of the most recognizable projects currently underway is the new Ybor Hotel. And we were happy to meet the new manager. The new manager has been selected. He's moving in from Minnesota. He's been with the Parian Group, who is the managing group of the hotel. So he's already been with Parian for a few years, and we are going to gain him. So we did a Ybor City introduction with staff last week to meet him and tell him a lot of information about Ybor City that he's interested in learning. The German American Club hosted a groundbreaking ceremony in August, and that was to announce the renovation of the vacant social club and the inclusive community healthcare facility that will house the Metro Wellness Center. So the Metro Wellness Center currently resides on 7th Avenue, but will go over into the German American Club once the development is complete. Let's see, CRA managers set up a meeting with the housing department representatives to better grasp the existing residential grant opportunities, such as the down payment assistance program and rehabilitation funds that are available to City of Tampa residents. And in fact, we're going to add an item in regard to a public-private partnership invitation to participate for redevelopment of surface parking lots with additional uses. The city currently does not own any property within the Ybor City area to initiate a workforce housing project, so that's just something that we've put out there to investigate whether or not we would issue an RFP to do a private-public partnership to hopefully gain some workforce housing in the district. And then with Hurricane Doreen, we had the opportunity to work with our new Yesking contractor. We hadn't had the opportunity yet to initiate them or introduce them to hurricane preparedness. So we had this opportunity to allow our new contractor to kind of get their feet wet, so to speak, of getting ready for an event of any disaster. Let's see, Councilman Goods recommended that we better address the eastern side of Ybor City as far as the businesses, and so we did canvass those businesses with information about how to sign up for newsletters so that they're getting the information they need to know what grants we have, just to be better informed. And we also have pulled all the addresses in Ybor City from all CRAs, or the 2 CRAs, and so we're going to be sending out this is just a preliminary, but we're going to be sending out a 5x7 postcard that will show some images of Ybor on the front side, and then on the back side, the invitation of where they need to sign up to start to get more information. So we'll be sending this postcard out probably in the next couple of weeks. Let's see. And then to your question about Hart and Public's riderships on the streetcar, we're working with Hart on creating a survey so that we can start to understand the demographic of the ridership of the streetcar and why they're riding it, and we'll specifically ask a question in regard to, are they riding the streetcar specifically to get to Publix? So we're working with Hart. That's in progress currently. We have a lot of coordination on a variety of repairs and upkeep of the district. We finally will be reglazing at the community's request the Adamo mural, the notable mural on Adamo Drive. We will be reglazing that. The original artist, Michael Parker, has offered to do that for us with some financial assistance, but he will be doing that this month. The Centennial Park, from a community request, the immigrant statue, we will be repairing the Centennial Park immigrant statue with assistance to the Arts Department. We're doing enhanced landscaping and irrigation improvements to Centennial Park and Palm Avenue medians. We've repaired many district signs, as well as installation of new 2-hour parking signs, 15-minute signs, freight signs, and we work closely with the Public Safety and Transportation Committee and the community on those requests. Let's see, and we're excited to announce that during the Florida Redevelopment Association Conference in October, Ybor will accept the promotions category statewide award for our More in Ybor marketing campaign. And in addition, rumor has it that Ybor City and downtown will be recognized with another award from a local organization in October. So we're excited to share more details with you on that. And that concludes my report, if you have any questions.
Councilman Digfelder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Courtney, thanks for your report. Just a couple of questions. In regard to the German American Club, is that a nonprofit organization that purchased that or a profit organization?
Profit, it's a private developer.
Okay, I thought so. And elsewhere in our packet is a $50,000, I assume it's 50, but I saw it's a facade grant to that group for a facade. I drive by the German American Club. It looked pretty good on the face of it. What are they doing to, for $100,000 or?
Yeah, I believe they've requested 42. Their investment would be 50, and our investment would be 42,000. Right. And I remember the report reading spalling. That's a new word for me, but it has to do with, I think the cement improving. I'd have to look at the report specifically. It'll be presented to you here in a minute.
Okay.
But it has to do with, I believe, cement repairs.
Okay, so some physical damage.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know procedurally, Mr. Chair, when you want to talk about this. I got an email from the Cuban Club, which is a nonprofit group, Mr. Montega, who they have some huge needs at the Cuban Club, but he's limited by this $50,000 cap in terms of the request. And procedurally, what do you want? Am I bringing that up as new business?
Let's bring that up under new business, please.
Okay. And the last thing, Courtney, is my bride, Lynn, serves as a volunteer on the county's historic marker committee. And I don't know if you've dealt with them before, but they're basically in charge of putting up new historic markers all over the county, including the city, as well as maintaining the old ones. There are quite a few markers, historic markers in Ybor City. Some of them are old. Some of them are actually inaccurate from what Lynn's board is saying. And they only cost $3,000 to replace, and sort of upgrade. So I guess I would just request that if you haven't yet, that you might touch base with that group.
We reach out to them. We've worked with them in the past, so we can find out where their assessment and work is in reference to Ybor City.
Because one thing they have a lot of energy and enthusiasm, but they don't seem to have much money. So if you have a sign or two in Ybor that maybe needs some help, maybe you could work together on that.
Of course.
Thank you.
We'll reach out. Thanks.
Councilman Goods.
Ms. Orr, thank you. I attended your meeting the other night.
Mm-hmm.
What I liked about the meeting was that you brought up housing in that meeting. So that tells me that you went outside the box and you saw what East Tampa is trying to do. And I talked about this at our first couple of CRA meetings when I asked Mr. McDonough, how many meetings do all of the CAC boards meet together to share ideas? And I'm going to make a motion in reference to that because that needs to happen, because it happened. Because I went to a couple other meetings and brought back some ideas to some other CRA meetings. So that needs to happen to all the CRA chairs or vice chairs, get together quarterly, a couple times out the year to look at ideas, what someone else is doing, to bring those ideas. And I like that you brought that idea to your board. But what I didn't like was some of the comments. Thought they were pretty mean, the language that some people were using about if we help people with housing, property values will go down, and Section A, and all these different type of things that were said. It was quite disturbing. But I like what you did by saying, let's bring the housing department here to explain about the program, because it's a place that everyone can live. So I'm happy that you did that, and I'm glad that you brought that idea to your board in reference to housing, because I'm going to talk about that later on in new business about housing, because I have some issues that we're not focused with these CRAs about housing, and we need to be more focused on housing. But thank you for what you did.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilman Carlson.
Just 2 quick points responding to my colleagues. Mr. Dingfeller talked about the German club. I think that's a good example of how we could take the facade grant money and split it into two. One bucket could be historic preservation grants, because we want to support historic preservation. It doesn't necessarily mean that the facade has to change. And then the other thing would be having some kind of mechanism to support small businesses or small business development, and maybe part of that would be that they would upgrade their facilities. Anyway, that's it.
Any other comments or questions from Ms. Orr? Thank you, Ms. Orr.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Oh, I'm sorry, they're still going. Procedurally, I was just going to suggest that, no, never mind, I'll wait until Ed's done. Go ahead.
Good morning again, Ed Johnson, East Tampa CRA Manager. We reported for this monthly report our top goals in the East Tampa CRA from the Community Advisory Committee's perspective. We had two goals that were reported for this month of September, and they both are in association with requests for proposals that are on the street or off the street. The very first one is the RFP for the remaining 26 vacant properties that we had in East Tampa that we did the RFP on. The advisory committee is currently finalizing the scoring of the 10 responses that we received, and they're expected to have their ranking and scoring completed by the close of business tomorrow, September 13th. The second RFP is related to our updating of our strategic action planning process, and that RFP actually closes on September 19th. So September 19th at 2 o'clock is the last day for proposals to come in for the strategic action planning update. And then then that will contract admin, our city's contract admin is handling this process. They'll immediately start the review process of those responses after 2 p.m. on the 19th. Another item of note, though, I would like to also bring to your attention the 34th Street Safety and Enhancement Project that has been in the works for a number of years on 34th Street from Columbus Drive to going north to Hillsborough Avenue. That contract for that work will be going out to bid on the bid openings on October 1st, 2019. So October 1st, folks can start looking for the bid packages on the enhancement work for the safety enhancement program for 34th Street. And remember, that is a FDOT, City of Tampa project. The TIF is involved on the tail end once the work is done. The TIF is committed to paying for some of the landscaping improvements and some of the public art on that project. So will be forthcoming probably another year or so, another year and a half. And last on my update is I just want to make sure when you are out riding around that you look throughout the East Tampa community at what is happening with
Ed, hang on for 1 second, please. Ed, hang on 1 second.
Okay.
To people in the audience, would you please turn your cell phones on silent? Thank you. Proceed, Ed.
Okay, thank you. I just want to bring to your attention, one of our jobs in community redevelopment, especially in CRAs, is to induce private investment. And as you're riding around the East Tampa community, please pay attention to the private sector new single-family residential construction that is booming right now in East Tampa. We have several private home builders that are not funded through our affordable housing arena. These are all market rate driven homes that are building substantial units in our area. So please take a look at them. There was one that that came to my attention. I didn't even know this was going on. It's a property on Chelsea and 26th Street. There's a new developer called Jim Construction. He is building all steel frame construction. The product is being manufactured in Sarasota, and he has built 4 or 5 of these homes in other parts of our community, and he has several lots in East Tampa that they are building on. The first home that he is building right now is on Chelsea and 26th. You need to take a look at that construction. It's pretty neat. It's about a 90-day window from start to finish. I went by one day and the steel framing was up, and they had the windows in where the windows and the doors were going to go, but nothing else was there. It was just the steel framing and the glass windows in, and I was just kind of amazed at this kind of construction. Yesterday I went by, and all the exterior paneling and everything is already up on the facility. So it's a pretty neat construction product, but it's all driven by the private sector. There is no investment from the TIF. The private sector folks are seeing that there are opportunities to build homes in our community. And these homes, by the way, on the 4 new developers that are building right now, all of these homes are in excess of $230,000. So it does work. We've seeded the opportunities over the last several years, and now we're starting to see private sector investment coming to this community. So I leave you with that, unless you have other questions.
Councilman Dingfelder.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Down at the bottom of your proposal it says, when you mentioned it about the RFP, and Mr. Bennett, perhaps this is more of a question for you as a general statement as related to RFPs, and I can't remember if I spoke with you or with Dennis about this issue. So I don't know if I've ever seen this particular RFP, but it's out on the street, and now vendors, developers will be responding to it, and then assuming we pick one, eventually it's going to end up either here to the CRA or to City Council at some point, just in the course of things. And I've expressed, and I think Mr. Carlson has expressed some concern in the past about us getting involved in these types of pretty significant contractual issues so late in the game. Because, by the time that RFP gets to us, everybody's been working on it, the city's been working on it, the developer's been working on it for 6 months, 9 months, or whatever, and it's a final product, and everybody's excited, and now it comes to council, and what if we have an issue with it? You know what I mean? So my suggestion, and I don't necessarily need to formalize it as policy, but I would hope in the spirit of cooperation, both as a CRA and the city, that we get a chance, that you take that RFP before it goes out on the street and run it by council and just say, this is the RFP we intend on doing. As a matter, so we as the policy body can just sort of bless it or ask any questions about it or whatever before everybody goes to all that trouble. I don't know how you feel about it, and I can't remember if we talked about it or if
We have not
talked about it.
Again, John Bennett, Chief of Staff, we have not. I have no issue socializing the concept, and I understand what you're saying. I just would have to talk to our legal department about the separation of duties between administration and obviously, what you do as a policy and legislative approach towards this. So, but I think looking at the continuum to get the best outcome is worthy of that examination. But I don't know where the bright lines are standing here right now.
I mean, the last thing that I want to do after everybody in the whole community has worked on something for 9 months or a year is put a stop to it at that point, because whereas if I or we had input in the beginning, then those concerns and issues could easily become non-issues, later on. So I think you get where I'm coming from. I don't know if anybody else has similar concerns on that.
Councilman Carlson.
I think this gets to the topic of 310 and the special issue. I think we need a strategy, and we need a structure, and a new reporting structure, a new reporting style. I think we need to look at this thing from top to bottom to figure out how do we run it in the right way. When I was running for office, lots of people said that that city council should be doing certain things with the CRAs, and I went to my friends, some of whom are not here anymore, and they felt like their hands were tied, that the last administration kind of controlled the CRAs through the back door. And so the discussion next is either we officially delegate or hand off and say the mayor's office is in charge of everything, and so we give up responsibility so we also don't get credit or blame, or we say we are going to be responsible for it, we're willing to accept credit or blame, but then we need a reporting structure that reflects that, and right now there isn't one.
Councilman Good.
Well, everything comes to pass. I think me and Ms. Zelma kind of had this conversation yesterday about contracts and RFPs, how they're inflated 30, 40%. That bothers me. And I think that we need to look at some other best practices, Mr. Carlson, Mr. Dingfellow, you're right. And we need to figure out why is it that the city government is being charged this astronomical price for a project when in reality it shouldn't cost this much, but it's inflated out to here. And yet it comes to us and we're forced to look at signing off on a project that you're like, I know doggone well it don't cost that much to build. I got a bathroom that costs $220,000. How do you pay for a bathroom $220,000? How does that cost get inflated like that? So we need to research other places, other best practices, so we don't stick the community with these bills or we lose money in these TIFs or in the city budget on projects that shouldn't be costing that kind of money. So I would agree, Mr. Deanfield, Mr. Carlson, that we look at, working with staff, Mr. Bennett, look at changing some policy.
Councilman Vieira.
Yeah, I think there is, on what was said, some rational basis there. At the very least, at a very minimum, going to the district council member who represents the area and talking to him or someday her, right, on what's going to prospectively happen at the very least. I think that is a pound of prevention that could really go a long way, because as Councilman Dingfelder said, I think it's a true and correct statement. If we're dealing with something where folks have been working on it for 9 months, we kind of feel pressured isn't the right word. There is a level of presumed unreasonableness if we say no to it. It's kind of like we deal with the budget. My friends on the MPO know exactly what I'm talking about as well, which is there's things that are hanging over our heads, so to speak, and at the very least, if the district council member, at the very minimum, has a dialogue on this issue to see if they want to bring it up before the CRA, I think that would be an act of prevention that could pay great dividends in the future, just for whatever that counts.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
1 second. Councilman Miranda.
Thank you very much. I'm not here to express anything, but I'm just going to name the last 4 mayors. Not Greco, not Iorio, not Buckhorn, not Castor has ever told me how, when to vote. Never have I been asked to do them a favor. And they're still alive, and you can call it grand jury if you want. But that's how I am. I don't keep no $400 a month. I don't want it. I don't keep nothing. Everything in my office is mine, not the city's. I don't even have the city print my own paper. My own business cards are mine. So if you want transparency, call me dumb, call me stupid, but that's who I am. Thank you very much.
Chief, proceed.
Well, that was it. I just came up to answer that question, so thank you.
So I guess in summary, Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Dingfelder.
a lot of the RFPs are not CRA. You know, they're just city, and then they come to us and that sort of thing. And I think that might be something Ms. Zelman and I might need to talk about if it's just a city function. But in this particular one, you know, Ed has it on his report. He's coordinating the CAC review and the scoring of an RFP, and he explained that was for 26 vacant properties for the redevelopment. I think we're all thrilled that those properties are going to be redeveloped. But like I say, as the CRA body, I don't know if we've had a chance to look at that the RFP before it went out, but I know we'll have a chance later, you know, as it's I assume, as it's coming back, since it's on our agenda. So we just need, let's deal with that and wrestle with that, especially as related to the CRA down the road.
Yeah, and again, clearly understand the position. I think we just need to figure out where the legal and the policy meet together to make sure that we're getting the best outcome. And I heard loud and clear the process that the board chair mentioned earlier about, there's a need, the CAC vets that, brings it to the board, and of course, we're here to help you facilitate that process. So wherever those boundaries can be enhanced, we're happy to take a look at them.
Thank you.
Chief, I apologize. Can you have that for us before next meeting or next meeting?
Yeah, I'll defer to legal a little bit, but I think we could figure that out before the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, the only comment I would add is, as Councilman Goods and I discussed yesterday, contracting and purchasing is regulated not just by city processes, but by state statute. So, and I realize we've kind of gotten outside the parameters of just the CRA, but into city purchasing as well. So it's a bigger issue than we can address simply today. So it may be a larger conversation with the purchasing department, contract administration, and so on and so forth as to how these decisions are made and when the council can be involved and when they cannot be. So that would be my only caution.
And again, we can be briefed at the next meeting?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Any questions, Fred? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Citro, Malcolm Kiner, Drew Park, and West Tampa CRA Manager. Provide a brief update. So starting with Drew Park, we are preparing to begin construction on the Tampa Bay Linear Park project. That project is between Air Cargo Road and Lois Avenue. The notice to proceed was issued to McKinsey Contracting on this past Monday, September 9th. Construction is expected to last 200 days. The completion date will be somewhere around the end of March. Our strategic action plan, we are currently preparing to update the SAP. We're working with contract administration right now on soliciting a professional services firm to update the plan. That will be coming back to this body for approval in the next couple of months. The Drew Park Commercial Facade Grant program is active and accepting applications, and I believe you do have an applicant on the agenda today. Lastly, for anyone watching from home, the Drew Park CAC does have 5 openings. If anyone is interested in participating in the community, if you have an interest, whether it be business, work, play, or just want to get involved, please contact CRA staff. Lastly, in the private sector, Hillsborough Community College Dale Mabry campus is celebrating the official opening of their $23 million Patel Allied Health Building. The ribbon cutting for that event will be at 10 a.m. on Friday, September 20th. And that concludes my Drew Park update, if you have any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Connor?
How's your quorums going now?
Far and in between. We currently have, there are 11 total positions, 5 vacancies, so we have 6 active participants, and all 6 don't make it every month.
Thank you.
So we do need applicants.
Mr. Chair.
Councilman Dingfelder.
Thank you. Malcolm, would it be helpful if we reduced the number from 11, down to 7 or something, so you could make a quorum? And I don't recall if I think that's our policy for each individual district, as compared to, it'd be hard to change the policy if you can't even get a quorum out there, if they were going to change the policy, but I'm not sure. I think that might be our policy.
I'll yield to legal, but yes, Sal is nodding.
Getting a nod from Sal in the corner, so that's good. So if that's something you might want to come back to us next month to revisit to help your quorum.
Yeah, I do think that's actually a good idea. In my opinion, after the large roadwork project was complete on Lois and Grady, community kind of lost it kind of help with the issues of flooding and beautify the community. So I'm hopeful that when we begin the strategic action planning process and we get back out into the community, we may find some folks that are interested
You're a
in
victim of
participating.
your own success. Well, anyway, think about it, and if you want, come back to us.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Malcolm?
So moving forward with the West Tampa CRA update, the West Tampa CAC is actively working in our subcommittees. We're preparing recommendations to this body for future programs and projects. The subcommittees are special events, economic development, infrastructure, and housing. The West Tampa CRA commercial facade program is active. We are taking applications. We are currently preparing for our second annual Unity Tampa Historical Cultural Festival, which will be held on Sunday, September 29th from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. at Julian B. Lane Riverfront Park. This event will include food trucks, vendors, and we also plan to recognize Ms. Ruth McNair and Dr. Walter L. Smith during this festival. Another community event that we're hosting on Thursday, October 17th at 6 p.m. We're hosting a workshop at the River Center at Julian B. Lane Park. This will be on homestead exemptions. The Hillsborough County property appraiser, Mr. Bob Henriquez, will lead that discussion for us, and this will be from 6 to 7 p.m. at the River Center. In the private sector, so not CRA funding, the Tampa Housing Authority is under construction at the Renaissance at West River. That project is on the corner of Main Street and Rome Avenue. They've also began rehabilitating the Mary McLeod Bethune high-rise project, and they have received financing for a third project that will be on the corner of Oregon and Main Street. And anyone that has been on CAS lately, the city Stormwater Department has begun work on the Cypress Street outfall project. That's beginning at the corner of Cass and North Boulevard. And lastly, just for information, our CAC meetings are held on the fourth Tuesday of each month at 5:30 p.m. at the West Tampa Public Library.
Any questions or comments, Mr. Kiner? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Chairman, that concludes the reports. So, as I heard eloquently throughout those reports, stylistically, I'm looking forward to maybe changing the structure, getting it more standardized as we go forward. But I appreciate the opportunity to change it up a little bit today.
Yes, sir.
As the maker of the motion on item 3, I would just perhaps request that we refer it until after we go with items 4 and 5, just because there's a lot of good substantive discussion that can happen in 4 and 5 before we get to this sort of process future discussion that is item 3. So that would just be my friendly suggestion. Just it's actually well-intended.
Councilman Dingfelder, there was a motion made and seconded and approved earlier that we combine 3 with 10, and that will be heard with 10.
At the end? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Sorry I missed it.
So next on your agenda is item 4,
Yes, sir.
your quarterly TIF financial report.
I'm sorry, we got to do public comments first.
All right, let's do that.
Anyone wishing to speak to the CRA board will have 3 minutes to do so in public comments for non-agenda items. Councilman Dingfelder.
Thank God for another day's journey. I'm going to read some scripture to y'all from the book of St. John, first chapter. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was the beginning with God. All things was made by him, and without him was not anything that was made that was made. In him was life, and the life of the light of men. And the light shined in darkness, and darkness comprehended it not. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. The same came for a witness, to bear witness of the light, and all men through him might be believed. He was not the light, but was sent to bear witness of the light. That was the light which lighted every man that cometh into the world. I would like to read the whole chapter, but I know y'all only gonna give me 3 seconds.
And sir, for the record, could you give us your name and address? And
thank you.
I'm always pleased when you want to read out of the book of John, so thank you.
Say that again.
I said
Okay.
I'm glad to hear the book of John, yes. Sir.
Okay, as long as they accept it, that's good with me. You know, last week y'all had a meeting on increasing the water. That filtered water that come out of them faucets, they ought to be giving us a rebate. And yet y'all increase it. I would like to know why y'all had a secret meeting. Why y'all don't have the public come here so we can see who's voting for it and who's voting it down. But since that mayor been in there, things been going backwards instead of going forward. And them red lights there, they ain't nothing but a money thief. They're taking money from the people that red light me 3 times. And I ain't never ran no red light. So that need to be investigated. And we don't know who we can get to investigate you all, because the idea, if we get Florida Supreme Court, they're all white folks, and they ain't gonna say nothing negative about you all. But I don't come here begging for no money. I come here for justification for all people. Otherwise, I could be home looking at TV right now. But I'm trying to stand up for people that are not able to stand up for themselves. And you know, I don't come here to read the scripture to try to low-rate nobody. I come here to read the scripture because it's the truth. And I want you all to know the truth. And the truth has set me free. I thank God that I believe in Jesus Christ, the one who died on the cross that we might have a right to the tree of life. And I like to tell the city council this here. Instead of giving us those 3 seconds, why don't y'all give us 5 minutes to speak on our behalf? So one day maybe I could come here and preach the gospel of Jesus Christ to y'all. I thank y'all for this little time and pray to God that you're all blessed. I like to get
And sir, your name and address for the record, and we appreciate it.
Pastor Frank Williams, located 1112 East Scott Street.
Thank
Been
you,
there
sir.
for over 30 years, and they treat me like an animal.
Thank you, sir.
Worse than a dog.
And for the record, this body does not hold any secret meetings. We never have, and we never will. Thank you.
Well, the one that control the district, I can't talk with them and your counselor.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Williams? Mr. Williams? Mr. Williams?
Mr. Williams.
Mr. Williams, you just made a comment you can't get a hold of a district person, but if you remember, I came to your place, Paradise, 2 days ago, and you had to cancel because you had a situation that you couldn't get
Right,
care for
and
your wife.
I left the message on your phone.
I did try to reach out, and I went by, then I waited.
Yeah, I know it. I left a message on your
I
phone.
just want to make sure.
And praying to God that we'll meet some other time.
All right,
Not
then.
only you by yourself, but the city council and all of them that will come. And I want to send up my grievance to everybody. Thank y'all for listening.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Young.
God bless.
Good morning. Tina Young, 503 East Jackson. I am the Special Events Chair for the West Tampa CRA. And I'm, like our CRA manager informed you, that the West Tampa CRA Unity Historical and Cultural Festival is scheduled for Sunday, the 29th at Julian B. Lane Park. I want to invite you all to come out, please. It's from 1 to 5. This is our second year, and this board has graciously granted us a budget of $10,000. And the reason that I'm before you today is because the CRA committee would like to expand this event this year. We are working with Tampa Housing Authority, and we would like to grow this event in size and in offerings, in activities and so forth. we would like to work with Tampa Housing Authority in essence of allowing them to pay for expenses that we cannot pay for because we are self-promoting and organizing this event, and we cannot pay for anything. So we are asking for your permission that we work with Tampa Housing Authority. They are already co-sponsoring this event with other expenses and activities, but we need your support so we are allowed to continue to build on this event.
Ms. Young?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, any questions or comments? Or Councilman Goods?
Thank you for coming, Ms. Young, and I know the festival is going to be great. Is Malcolm still here? Can you elaborate a little bit more to get a little clarity what we're trying to do here so I can get a good understanding?
Yes, sir. So I know we're a bit at the ninth hour, but as Tina said, she's the chair of our subcommittee and has been actively planning this event. The West Tampa CAC last year decided to host their own community festival. In typical fashion with CRAs, and Sal can help me with this if I'm not saying it correctly, in typical fashion, the CRAs co-sponsor nonprofits or private entities in terms of special events that take place within their respective CRAs. But the CAC was dead set on, we want to do this, we want to make sure we put our fingerprints all over this festival and it follows through with our vision. Now, the downside of doing that is that then falls on myself as CRA city staff in terms of procuring services. So there are just certain things that I cannot purchase based on our procurement policy. So what Tina is asking you for is that we work with the Housing Authority, who has agreed to sponsor some of those things that make a festival special, like a bounce house, a train,
Recreational activities.
lawn games, things of that nature, up to $3,000. And then in working with them, they would cover a certain amount in terms of their own sponsorship, but anything above and beyond, we would then reimburse them for. Up to $3,000.
Mr. Chairman, are you looking for motions now at the end?
And may I also add, I'm sorry, Councilman, as Tina discussed, previous council did approve a $10,000 budget for this event, and to date, we have about $4,700 in expenses. So we're still under budget for the event if we work with the Housing Authority.
In answer to your question, Councilman Goods, at this particular time, I'd like to see a motion made and possibly seconded so we can expedite things and keep things moving.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to put a motion on the floor that the CEC board work with the Housing Authority in allocating those funds of reference to the event to be held on September 29th.
Yes, sir.
Question.
Motion, comments, discussions? Councilman Dingfelder.
Thank you. I'm looking at the West Tampa CRA budget for last year, 2019, and there's a marketing and promotion budget, and it's showing a balance forward of $39,000.
Correct.
And then next year, under item 5, similarly, I think there's a marketing and promotion budget of $20,000 that's being proposed.
Correct.
So it appears that y'all have the money for it.
Correct. Yes, sir.
You just need to allocate it?
I need to allocate it, and in order for us to, in full transparency and actually work with them, we just felt appropriate that we come to this body, get it on the record, and then we'll move forward.
And has there been a CAC vote in support of this already?
Yes. So at our last CAC meeting, at the end of last month, we just, to reaffirm everything, we had the board make a vote to approve that $10,000 again to work towards the festival.
And so that's the motion, is the 10,000? Okay, up to 10,000.
Up to 3,000 for this, but we have that within that 10,000.
They already have it allocated for the 10, but what they're trying to do, they can't move forward unless we go to another nonprofit, basically.
Okay. All right.
Any other discussion? Councilman Carlson.
Malcolm, can I just ask from a process point of view, and this gets to the larger discussion later, how come this wasn't just put on the regular agenda? Like, why isn't it just a budget agenda item that we would approve?
Because we're coming to you in the ninth hour, and
Okay.
we were not prepared.
Okay.
And so, in working with my subcommittee, and I kept telling them no, kept telling them no, kept telling them no, because I didn't know how we could actually move forward. I said, well, this is your opportunity. Come, this is our CRA. Come and ask.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
And,
honesty.
Mr. Carson, it's really not about the budget, it's about us being able to work with someone that's approved by this committee or board, that we can pay for things that Malcolm is not able to pay for.
And just so you know, I'm in favor of what you're talking about, just trying to figure out the processes we can use going forward, so
And I
that you don't have to
apologize.
spend
Yes,
all your
sir.
time
Okay.
coming up here.
And I apologize. And moving forward, I'm hopeful in working with Tina and the CAC that we will look into partnering with an organization or another entity next year, so we can come to you, ask you for whatever that budget request is, and move forward, and we don't run into this issue.
Any further discussion? We have a motion made by Councilman Good, seconded by Councilman Dingfelder. All in favor, say aye.
Mr. Chairman, Jim Cruz, City Clerk's Office, may I ask that the motion be formally stated in its entirety for the record, and who was the second?
Thank you. Councilman Goods?
That the allocated funds that has already been allocated for the event can be partnered with the Tampa Housing Authority for the sponsorship,
Correct.
up to the $3,000 or whatever that marker is that you already have allocated for $10,000.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilman Dingfelder, you're still seconding that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
The motion carried unanimously. Thank you.
I was waiting for the time to restart, sorry. Okay. Natasha Goodley, 2705 East 24th Avenue. I am here on behalf of the East Tampa Community Revitalization Partnerships, CAC. We just met this past Tuesday, and the board asked me to come forward to thank you for taking up the charge to build a community center, a cultural enrichment center at Al Barnes Park. And on behalf of the ETCRP CAC, we support funding this project, but we hope you're able to pull funds from other sources that limits the impact for the CRA, but we are in full support of funding what we need to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Goodley,
Yes, sir.
if I may ask, would you prefer, would the community prefer that we actually ask this to go through the proper process of having committee reports, asking the community, giving the committee reports, sending it to the board, and then bringing us the request? I understand that the money is there. I understand that the money has been allocated. Would you prefer going through the process and coming back and requesting these monies be spent specifically on this community center?
So are you, okay, I want to make certain I understand exactly. Are you talking about the financial portion? Would
Yes,
you
yes,
rather
ma'am. Yes,
we
ma'am.
tell you how much we want to give? Is that what you're
No.
saying? Okay, please explain it again.
Okay. A request has been made by Councilman Goods that there be a community center built in East Tampa, which $1 million coming from the city, $1 million coming from the CRA. Correct?
Right, correct, yes.
Which I seconded that motion, and I agree wholeheartedly with that motion. However, me personally, I would love to hear things above board, transparency, and clarity in that. Now, I would like to see that the community speak on this, then go to committee, then go to the board, and the board coming back and asking the CRA board, or saying that, yes, that's what we would like to do, coming out of our budget. Are you willing to do that? Would you like that to be done as transparency?
Just having meetings with the public to state that that's what they're interested in, that's what they'd like to have, and the funding?
Yes.
We could do that.
Board, is that agreeable to everyone on this board? Councilman Dingfelder.
Mr. Johnson? Ed? Ed, when I look at last year's recap, and I'm on, what page? I don't know, the pages aren't numbered. I'm on the East Tampa CRA budget under tab 4, and this is for the last year's budget. Is kind of the recap of where we're at and what the carryover was, what the balance is. So I assume you prepared this or worked with the accounting to prepare it. But under neighborhood infrastructure improvements, it says install improved neighborhood infrastructure, including sidewalks and streetlights, $2.537 million, $2.5 million as a balance out of that neighborhood infrastructure improvement funds. Can you tell me more about that $2.5 million? Is it wholly allocated, or is it actually being carried over?
That's a carryover that the advisory committees in the past have agreed that the neighborhood infrastructure line item would be our carryover, and that would be where we rest remaining dollars that have not been formally allocated to a specific project yet, because as you know, all of our infrastructure projects are multi-year projects. They don't just happen in one fiscal year. They usually carry over fiscal years. So neighborhood infrastructure is what we're supposed to be using the dollars for in the CRA. So we created that line item to be able to have the catch-all. So all of our resources are placed in neighborhood infrastructure, and then as projects are developed by the advisory committee over the course of the year or the next year, that's where those dollars come from. So if a project all of a sudden beams up for building a recreation center in Al Barnes Park, it would, if the request is made as to what that line item dollar amount should be, it then would go through the advisory committee process. The advisory committee would agree or disagree. If they agree to fund it, the funds then would come from that neighborhood infrastructure line item, and then finance would then create a subcategory of that for that specific dollar amount.
So the bottom line is that $2.5 million is there, and it's not encumbered.
That's correct.
Okay.
At this time.
And let me just ask, Ms. Godley, is it?
Goodley.
Goodley, I'm sorry. You guys met this week?
Yes.
Did you discuss the rec center
Yes.
issue? Was there a vote or a discussion or any formal action done by the subcommittee?
Yes.
And what was that?
Well, we voted in support of it, that we would help fund it, and for me to come forward and just letting you know we are in support of funding it.
The $1 million.
Or less if you can find money from elsewhere. So, yes.
So in other words, if this body said up to $1 million out of the CRA, out of the East Tampa CRA district, out of that $2.5 million, then as far as your subcommittee is concerned, they're comfortable with it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Goods.
You know, I always appreciate good dialogue. I always appreciate transparency. But I don't like roadblocks. I think we've discussed the need. The community had already discussed with this board who were out there in the campaign trail what their needs and desires already were. So I don't know why we are rehashing or talking about transparency when we already know what the community has already said. We have over 300 seniors who have told us, you've met with on this board and said what they wanted. So you're talking about a cultural enrichment center that will house our seniors to do what they need to do. And then you have a section that will house our youth so they don't have to be out in the hot heat or in the dark doing step out in the parking lots at the NFL Yet Center, at Cyrus Green, where they can go someplace where they can be able to do ballet, dance, gymnastics, be able to get a scholarship or what we need to do to further their careers. Period. So, again, I thank Ms. Gilley for coming here and the CAC board for coming. And I think that we need to move on with this process and start looking at some designs, start looking at, my office already called Mr. Brad Suter, set up a meeting with him in reference to how this thing can be come to fruition. So that's all I have to say on that point, and I think we need to move on.
Any further discussion? I will finish with this. Mr. Goods, you know, I seconded your motion. I want to see this built. Yes, I have heard what the community has to say. This is not a comparison. However, the community voted for the all-for transportation tax. One or two people have reared their heads saying, no, we don't want to, and now it's in the Supreme Court. We have heard what the committee has to say, but we didn't hear from the full board. I am just wanting to have it go through the process so that everybody involved gets a clear picture of not only what the community wants, what the committee wants, but what the CAC wants, and then bring it before us. Again,
I think it went to the board, correct?
Did it go to the board? Has the board recommended? Has
Yes,
the board given their blessings?
That's what I'm speaking on behalf of the CAC, yes.
Is it in writing?
Yes, it's in our minutes.
Okay.
The motion was made.
Then in that case, if that is all factual, then I have no problem with it. Just as long as Ms. Goodley is saying, yes, it has gone from citizens to committee to board, and the board voted on it and approved it. Mr. Carlson.
Just following on that, what he said, is it possible just to get a letter from the, so it's not just in the minutes? Would that help in what you're saying?
If it's in the minutes and the minutes have been accepted, written, accepted, and approved, I'm fine with that. Legal, do you have any comments on that?
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you very much.
So the minutes were from Tuesday, so they have not been approved just yet, but Ms. Eva can compile those and send those over. They are approved at the next meeting.
Okay, if you would like to send us those minutes that have been approved, I'm fine with that. Just for transparency, just to make sure everybody knows what's going on, including me. Thank you, Ms.
Okay,
Goodley.
thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Carol Ransom. I live at 3507 East Genesee Street, Tampa, Florida. So it is an honor and a privilege to be here this morning. I do want to thank you for this opportunity. When we talk about transparency in our community, and I live in District 5, we have some issues there. Number one, we've been asking for sidewalks, and these are from the areas where we have schools, high schools, elementary schools, as well as others. The children walk home. We don't have the sidewalks. So those carryover dollars for the infrastructure, we would like to see that expedited because that's part of safety. We also ask for crossing lights from the playgrounds. We have little children that's running, dashing across the street when they think it's not a car, and we would like to have crosswalks there. The other particular that's very concerning is the construction of that new pharmaceutical marijuana distribution house, plant, weed house, grow house, whatever it is you guys are proposing in my community. That is very disturbing. You have less than 33 footsteps from the Easter seal, where we have children that have unique inabilities, and you would allow construction of a distribution plant for marijuana in my community. It seems to be unethical and immoral. I don't know who got this through permitting or what deal was made before or after you took the seat, but I think this is something we need to look at. More than 4 schools in that 6-mile radius. There are 3 schools that are charter schools in that area. There's an elderly apartment building across the street, and I think this is unacceptable. This is indecent for people in the community. Now, if this is something you agreed to, just in case, then maybe we should put it in your district and not in mine. We are all voters here. We come here because, and just like the pastor said, we want to do what's fair and what's just. We pay an equal share of taxes in District 5, and yet our community looks like 1986. We have been left behind. Whole communities left behind. the dollars that carry over. We hear about a senior citizen, and I'm not opposed to seniors. I hope the Jazzy seniors get somewhere to go. But in the meantime, we have no workforce housing. 20,000 people on the waiting list for Section 8. Workforce housing. If you can expedite $1 million for that and start looking at plans, you need to be expediting a place for people to live. We have families living on the sofa, in with other families, and living in motels. Cannot afford it. Thank you.
Ms. Ransom, stay
Yes,
right there,
please.
Councilman Dingfelder.
Yes, ma'am. We appreciate you taking the time to come down here and share those thoughts with us. I always like to set the record straight, okay? And I don't expect you to watch us or to know what's going on in every aspect of what we do. That marijuana issue has not come to city council yet, okay? I don't know if it'll ever come to city council because we haven't been briefed on it. But I can assure you, okay, I'm a man of my word, that that issue has not come to this council yet. If it comes, when it comes, how we decide is a whole another ballgame, and everybody would have a chance to speak to that, okay, as a part of a public hearing process. But it has not been here yet. So I just wanted to set the record straight on that, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Ransom?
Yes, sir.
On a side note with Mr. Dingfelder, we did have people come at our last meeting about public comment about that situation, and we couldn't discuss that because it hadn't come before this council. But I did make a motion that staff come and brief us on what's going on down that street so we'll know what's going on. So that's being done. As far as the infrastructure and sidewalks, you're right. I don't count on the all transportation dollars because we ain't got that money. So, it's held somewhere, but we don't know if we're going to get that money. But I count on our CRA dollars that we do have in our community to start working on those items that you're talking about. I'm going to talk a little bit later on when we get in our new business in reference to our environmental pond that we have. You're right about housing.
34 retention ponds in one district.
You're absolutely right.
No other district has
you're absolutely right.
34.
And I'm going to talk about
That's
that a little
an
bit later.
embarrassment to my community.
Let me finish. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in new business and some things that other cities that have CRAs, other cities that are doing. And I'll talk about the little issue when it concerns housing. But thank you for your comments, and I understand what you're talking about.
Any other comments? Ms. Ransom, I am not speaking for this board. I am not speaking for city council. I'm speaking for me. For a marijuana grow house to be next to a school, to be next to a rehabilitation center, in my opinion, is wrong. It hasn't come before the city council, and we have to, Sal, please.
You shouldn't be discussing this at this time. I apologize for that. Sal Cerrito, you shouldn't be giving an idea what your vote's going to be until you've heard the matter. I understand your feelings on that. This is a caution.
Thank you. Then, Ms. Selman, may I say that this is home rule that is not,
Well,
that is superseded by state law?
a couple of things. I'm not personally aware of a particular case coming before you on a medical marijuana facility, but if it is, then Mr. Torito is absolutely correct. We really shouldn't be talking about it now. I do see that on the 19th, the city staff has been asked to provide a report about one facility and these facilities in general. And I'm not yet ready to provide that report. I am somewhat familiar, though, with the state statute regarding these facilities.
Thank you.
And I can tell you that the Florida legislature in this last session did tie the hands of local governments pretty significantly with regard to where medical marijuana distribution facilities can be located. So everyone needs to be aware of that. This may be a beef that should be taken to the Florida legislature and not to the local government, because the local governments really are limited in how much they can limit the locations of these facilities. And again, we're going to be providing a more substantive report on September 19th about that.
Sal, I thank you very much for your guidance as always. I've already said too much, but I also feel I haven't said enough. Home rule. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Council. Verlene speaking, living at Arbor Place out on Fletcher. I would like to speak in regards to the mayor's budget. It has to be some type of approval for October 2019. We're going to speak about this working class housing being a priority. We done had affordable housing, we done had low income housing, we done had poor people housing. So I would like to know when she come out with this budget, what type of housing will be available for the low income people. Also, the mayor has allocated 75 new homes. She got 200 new affordable rentals that she's going to be initiating to the Tampa Housing Initiation. $1.6 million for state housing. I understand we got all this beautification, instruction going on here in Hillsborough County, downtown, but when we go across Hillsborough, there is no more grocery stores except for Walmart. We need some more grocery stores in the area so they do not have to travel to another city or another county for shopping. I would like to know, as far as the senior citizens, the recreation community centers. I visited 3 of them yesterday. The smell of mold and mildew is there. So if we're talking about infrastructure, getting these buildings taken care of, when these senior people sit in these buildings and I'm coughing and sneezing, they done been there so many times, so their immune system must be used to it. So we need to get somebody out there to inspect these recreation centers for senior citizens in our east side area. Someone needs to get out there and take a look at this structure. Also, off the agenda, I have a transparency with the city of Tampa. I've been asking for my money. I have a caveat in Hillsborough County Courthouse. Department of Revenue, back child support. I need my money. I want a better place to stay, because right now, the health conditions that I'm receiving now, respiratory infections, asthma, injury, and mental health. And again, I will ask for my own padded room before somebody Baker-act me. I've had enough of this. This is for myself and everybody that looks like me and who has that limited income. Again, I thank you for this time and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Mr. Daniels.
It's good to know that can be called by name, recognized by face, but that name is really Mentiznot. That means anything's possible. Mentiznot means anything's possible in Amaretto. And what we have to recognize is what city government, state government, and federal government is used for. And it's used for that wedge between the working class and the wealthy. And we see a good example of it right here. Bunch of racism going on, bunch of trickery going on, continuously tricking the people. And you have to be old enough to understand it. You have to be old enough to understand how they tricked us with Riverfront Park back in the day when they were like, oh, we need a park, and other people were saying we need a learning center and other things going on. We have to understand when white people in their 30 and 50-year plan, they tricking the African out of our properties. That's what they're doing. The city government, the same city government that sits here, starting with Sandy Freeman, tricked all the African people. Oh, drug houses, gang properties, code enforcement, tricking black people out of their properties. And if it's homestead, they tying it up. So it's no equity, it's no value to property, and it's not attracted by anyone of interest. And you can't do anything with it. Tricking African people. Now they talking about a senior center, $1 million just out there. And people cannot find a place to live. No affordable housing. That's very important. It's very important. And we have to really, really reprioritize our priorities. Right here in the news this morning, they're talking about $1.2 million going to beautify something. And right downtown, between Trinity and Nebraska and downtown, you see homeless people everywhere. It's embarrassing. And the white folks so smart and they so ahead of time, not only in closing off Florida Nebraska Avenue, the white folks so smart and ahead of time with them attempting to attract the Olympics and the Super Bowl coming, they're already cleaning up the homeless people. You can see them every night harassing homeless people and have thousands of people with no place decent to live. Go along Hillsborough Avenue and see families, whole families walking up and down Hillsborough Avenue late night trying to get into a hotel. begging for money to do so, tricking African people. And this have to stop, and this city council have to stop it. This city council have to stop it. We need services, and we need affordable housing. That's what we need.
Thank you. Next, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I didn't get the, hey, how you doing, Yvette? Okay, but anyway, I come to you to.
Miss Lewis, could you please give us your name?
Oh, thank you, Yvette Lewis. You want my address too?
If you don't mind.
3010 East Cayuga. I come to you as a concerned citizen this morning of East Tampa. Talk about the trickery. I'm not sure what's going on with our CRA. I'm not sure going on with the East Tampa Revitalization Partnership, but I do know that the community is not getting these notices. The community is not aware of what's being voted on or what's being said or what's being done. I have talked to several residents in the community, and they're not aware of what's happening until it's happening. So I'm going to ask y'all to make an initiative or to do something to make sure that they get notice, that they get some information, and that, because you got 5 or 6 people sitting on a board that's voting on something that affects everybody's life. First of all, I keep hearing about they voted on this roundabout. I live right there. We ain't asked for no roundabout. I don't even know when the meeting was done. So y'all need to figure this out, okay? The second thing is about this senior citizen thing. Let me explain this to you. Fair Oaks Park has been promised a new building for the past 6 or 7 years. Councilman Goons, you stated that on the campaign trail, this is what they heard. And I'm sorry to call you out, but this is what you say. We all know what the community has been asking for. There was a meeting held with the residents over there at Fair Oaks Park. In that meeting, Jane Cassidy was running for mayor at the time. She said that she was going to make Fair Oaks Park rebuilding a priority. Those people still don't have it. We need more we need more room. We need a whole new building. When the city first promised it, they took the money from Fair Oaks and gave it to another community. Then they came back and they said they had money. Then the city took it and gave it to another community. How long do these people have to continue to wait for a new building? And then you come here and I got to hear that you finna build another building asking for $1 million? And who told you we wanted that when these people are needing a new building? There are rats, roaches, and everything. They don't have the center. They don't have the need, the room, the space. When the kids meet in the summertime, the seniors have to go somewhere else. They got to leave their own community. It's a shame for God. Councilman Carson, you're right. I done rode up and down Hillsborough. We don't need not now another beauty center there because it ain't benefiting none of us because Oriental people own it, not black folks. Thank you.
Miss Lewis. Miss Lewis, can you please come back? You talk about Fair Oaks. You know, I put a program there years ago, many years ago. It was thriving. It's no longer there anymore. It's the Fair Oaks Rattlers. Put that program there. Built it from the ground. I know all about Fair Oaks. And when I did the research about Fair Oaks, because somebody came to me about Fair Oaks, because I was at their meeting the other night. And I talked to the residents there the other night and told them what the plans were that was talked about throughout the community, because I heard what people in the community said. So as far as money, the city did whatever they did, because my understanding, they took the money that was allocated for Fair Oaks and went and took it for Williams Pool, and never put that money back to redo Fair Oaks Park. So we need to question, or I need to ask the Paul Dow, well, when is that going to be on the table for Fair Oaks to get that money? Now, there is budget in the budget for infrastructure. And that's my point about our CRA. We've got to do a better job of spending the money. We ain't been spending the money. And my thing is, I want the money spent. The money should be sitting there. It should be going in doing studies. We've got a big environmental pond that's probably something to be done for housing. I have a lot of issue concerns on the table that I want to get out. So I understand your frustration, because I feel the pain too, because I live there too. But I have an idea how we can work together and start having these open dialogue meetings town hall meetings that I'm gonna start having, so we all come together to do and build a plan on how we want to proceed, so that the ETRPC, which is in our boundary, know how we want to proceed. So now they can start having quorums, because the problem has, for many years, the board has been transient, like some of the other CRA boards, and you're not gonna be able to have a quorum to get things pushed, to get things done, period. So if you ain't got a quorum, and Mr. Critchell talked about transparency and policy, the problem you have with a lot of East Tampa problems is we haven't had a consistent board, because I believe the number on the board is too large. You're not getting the people to come there to be able to get the items on the table to vote, to get items pushed through into our community. And that's something we may have to look at down the road, downsizing that board to make sure we have enough for a quorum each and every time to get items pushed out into our community to build our community up. So that's where I'm at with that. I want to partner with you and your organization, but these are the fights that we got to fight, and we got to fight them right now.
Chairman, may I respond?
Please,
So you
I
said,
give you 30 seconds.
So you said you're fighting for a quorum. So if you ain't had no quorum, who did the voting?
No, let's come back. Let's come back. What I said, the board has been transient throughout the years, and that's why you don't see a lot of development going on, because throughout the years they hadn't had a quorum to put issues on the table to vote upon to get things out and done.
So who's voting on this?
Now they've got a few people on the board to have a quorum now at their last 4 or 5 meetings to be able to vote on items.
Oh, so the last 4 meetings you
Well,
had a
I'm
quorum.
just saying, they've had quorum. I'm not gonna argue about it. What I'm saying is, the problem sometimes, since when I sat on that board, and I used to go to meetings and be frustrated that we did not have enough people to fight some issues because of lack of a quorum. And I'm gonna leave it at that. But thank you for your
Ms.
time.
Lewis. Thank you, Councilman Goods. Councilman Carlson.
I think this, sorry, give me just a second. I think that we're going to get to items 3 and 10 later, but I think this gets back to governance. The question is, who's in charge of all of this? And not on the individual CRA level, but who's in charge overall? Who's setting the policy? Who's setting the direction? Who made the decision to leave these monies in the accounts and not spend them? Who's giving the policy advice on how money should be spent or not spent? Who's setting the parameters for all that? And I think ultimately it stops with us. And so at some point we have to have some kind of strategic planning, and we need an executive who reports to us, who's in charge and takes direction, gives guidance to these individual CRAs so that money's not sitting in accounts and it's spent the way the communities want it to be.
Good morning, Bishop Patty.
Good morning, Bishop Michelle B. Patty, P.O. Box 4624, which is located in West Tampa. I'm here as a senior citizen who passed Fair Oaks and stops in at Fair Oaks, know personally that center is used not only by our seniors, but by our youth. It is a well-used center. Councilman Good, you say that you heard that the money was there. Well, then there should not even be a discussion at this point. Fair Oaks should have been put on the front burner and taken care of. And we should not be in this arena pitting one community against the other. I'm talking about the black community, because now people at at the Al Barnes field would feel like black people are speaking against them when that is not the case. We're saying we're big enough and pay enough taxes where everyone should be having the same results. So it shouldn't be where we have something different in one community versus the other. I'm tired of people pitting us against one another. That needs to stop. So Fair Oaks, we know that it needs to be done. It has been promised, and I'm glad to see everyone here, because I met you all on the campaign trail from the mayor down, stating that you all were going to do certain things over in East Tampa and West Tampa, and now we're getting the moonwalk. We're going, the illusion of going forward, but when we're actually going backwards. There's a lot of conversation that's being done, but let's get things done. I'm glad for this new board. You seem to have the pulse of the people. You do know what's going on. So we need to start fixing the problem and stop just beating up. And I love the interaction. We usually never have interaction with the speakers that come up, but it shows me that you all do care. So what we need to do is stop talking and get it done. Seniors, and once again, reiterate, I am a senior. Glad to be a senior, and we are looking to stay young. We used to want to be physically fit, and that's why they want these upgrades in the centers. We don't have that issue in Brandon, South Tampa, Davis Island. You don't have those type of issues. They have heated pools, the whole 9 yards. So as a taxpayer, because we're not paid, our taxes are not less because of where we live. So we're asking that you give us the full benefit of our tax dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Patty. Next, please. Next, please.
Good morning. My name is Ronnie Scott. I live at 3615 East Wilder Avenue. I live right down the street from Fair Oaks, in walking distance. I go there twice a week. And it don't need to be renovated because the city trucks be there every day doing something, patching up. It need to be torn down, and we need a new center there. And that's my reason for being here this morning. And District 5, Orlando Good, you ride down Wilder Avenue or just in the area. It's run down in the area. Grown up property is overgrown. The white folks, or however you want to say it, come in there and buy those houses. People come in there and they stay a little while. They have chicken, goats, and all that in the yard. You call code enforcement. Code enforcement, what are they doing? Nothing. They're not doing anything. The house next door to me, I done called about that house 4, 5, 100 times or more. They come and say this or that or whatever, and they gone, and that's it. It's code enforcement coming there. Oh, we did this, we did. I don't do nothing. Now, if it was my house, where you think I'd be at? Be trying to find another house or either sell it, okay? So you get what I'm saying. Me as a black person and somebody else come in and do whatever they want to do. And I'm a little sick of it. I am. But ain't nothing I can do. So that's why I'm down here to let y'all know what we are going through in East Tampa. Thank you.
Ma'am.
Councilman Goods.
Ma'am.
Yes.
Come on back. Before you leave, I want you to go next door and you tell the young lady, Miss Debbie, that you need to see my secretary, my aide.
Okay.
And that way she gets your phone number, your correct address. I was just on Wilder last night, so I know what's going on in our communities. I'm fighting every day. I just got here. I've been here about going on maybe 4.5, 5 months. So I got my pad and I go through and I'm taking notice to what needs to be done. We have a new chief of staff. He's back taking notes, and he understands. So we're going to make some things happen. We're going to try to spend that money in that CRA to make some things happen because it needs to happen. And I'm going to come by and visit, and you can show me where those chickens and those goats at, all right?
Well, you know.
I see you, Sherman, back there.
They gone now, some of them, but you still see a couple
right?
of chickens running around in the street.
But I'm behind you 100%, okay? And I'm going to come see you, okay?
All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Ma'am, hang on 1 second, please. Councilman
Well,
Carlson.
related to all this, I just have to ask, we have parks like the one, or community centers like the one they mentioned, I think Fair Oaks, that are run down. But you all mentioned the retention ponds. There are brand new fences and brand new beautiful signs in front of the retention ponds. Does anybody have any idea why the money was spent on that instead of the community center? Anyway, just a question. This is why we need to set policy.
There are a lot of questions. I wish I had an answer for why we have what we have. But we're going to move forward, all right?
Thank you, ma'am. Next, please.
Thank you.
How y'all doing today? I'm Sherman Harris. My address is 3413 East Shadow. I'm here also for interest in Fair Oaks Park and interest in the roundabouts on 31st that's coming. That information that's there, I don't think the community wants those roundabouts. Why couldn't they take that money and direct it to the park if nobody wants them in that community? They voted on them, but like y'all said, she said earlier, nobody's getting information out for us to know this. By the time the community knows this stuff, y'all done voted on it. Y'all ready to go and get contractors and start work. How do we get this information in our community? How do we know what y'all doing? What you voting on? Answers?
Well, I think Sherman, Mr. Harris, I think that the roundabout situation was before most of our time here. And I believe that the roundabout is being done by FDOT, Florida Department of Transportation, not by any CRA dollars. Now, the CRA dollars that Mr. Johnson talked about earlier, that's for some beautification and some aesthetics, but the bulk of that project is not CRA money, it's FDOT money. So FDOT got into agreement somehow with the city, and that's how that worked as far as that project. Now, some folks on 34th Street, when you go down toward Columbus area, some of those folks in that area, when that project apparently came up, from what I've understood, that area wanted the roundabouts. Now, as far as 34th and Osmond, I don't know, but I know the latter part, MLK back, those folks in those community associations, they wanted that. But they won't come out publicly and say that. They'll do it in their own association meetings, but they're not coming out public because they don't want to be targeted. They don't want people to say bad things about them because of what they want in their community. And sometimes I can't pretty much blame them because no one wants to be criticized, but it's their community down there, and that's what they wanted, and that was voted on way, way long time ago for this board was even here. So that's how that's working, you know?
That's what I'm hearing, but still, Orlando, you, like I said, we both grew up in that area.
Yes, sir.
Folks, if you run down to 34th and Osborne, you figure at the middle of the night, 12 o'clock, you're gonna have some young kids doing donuts around there. Y'all gonna constantly, if you put something to beautify that, constantly repair that. That's taxpayers' money, right?
I can say I can agree with
sitting
you
there
because I
24
know how
hours
it
a
works.
day.
But
my guess is that's gonna get repaired more than y'all want it.
But I think that's already been down the road gone, Sherman. I don't think that we can bring that back, so we'll have to take those issues as they come. But thank you for the comments, brother.
All right. So
Thank you very much, sir.
what are our intentions for our part, though? The next budget?
No, I think that the community needs to go basically to the CAC meeting, voice their concern. There is money in that budget for some renovation, but I think we also need to get with the city to see where that money was spent, how it was spent, and if it was allocated someplace else, I think they need to look at putting it back eventually to get that done. Or if it's saying they just can't, then we have to look at the CRA dollars to try to fix up Fair Oaks as well.
But there's a
Thank
new
you very
budget,
much,
right?
sir.
Yep.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak during public comments? Chief Bennett, let's move on to agenda item number 4.
So Chairman, I'm understanding that's a receipt and file for number 4. Is there anything that we need to discuss?
Does anybody have any comments or any questions? Yes, we have a motion to receive and file.
No, I did have.
Then please proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett or Dennis, probably more Dennis. Numbers question, John. Run.
I'm a numbers guy, too.
Yeah. I know you are. I'm just teasing. There's been discussion in East Tampa, but I know it's true in all of the different districts, that if we look through this item, for each of the district, there seems to be a balanced carryover, and not an insignificant one. The downtown CRA budget looks like it's got a balance forward of $13 million. So that seems to be the trend. I don't know that our city budget necessarily has that large unencumbered balance forward. Usually our balance forwards are typically encumbered. So just fill me in, Dennis, on your thoughts about that, and is that a policy thing that, as Mr. Carlson said earlier, something that this body should be addressing for future reference.
Thank you, sir. Dennis Rogero, Interim Chief Financial Officer. Yes, in contrast to what I think we regularly do on the city side of the budget, on the CRA side of the budget, although some of this funding has a particular purpose or is envisioned to have a particular purpose in the future, it's not necessarily spelled out specifically. I would like to see that going forward, and I think it would provide a clearer picture to the viewing audience as to just how much of this funding is truly a balance and how much of this funding is intended for a specific purpose.
Okay, so in the future, we'll address that and tighten that up?
I would like to see that, yes.
Okay. Similarly, each of the districts appear to have interest earnings, quote, not yet allocated. I'm looking at page 6 on the EBOR budget is 111,000. EBOR 2 is 46,000. Channel District 600,000. Drew Park 470,000. Tell me about that interest earnings not yet allocated. Is that also part of the unencumbered balance forward?
It is.
And where?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It is similar to the unencumbered balance forward. It is funding that we have that has a purpose has not been identified for yet, and we haven't appropriated that funding. Make a long story short, it is interest earnings in part due to the balances that we're holding.
Okay.
And I just add an addendum there, and to my knowledge, a purpose for that particular funding has not been decided upon.
So, yeah, East Tampa has $1 million interest earnings not yet, quote, not yet allocated. But there's no concern that money will go anywhere. It's just sitting there. It's not going to go into the general fund or anything like that. It's just sitting there waiting to be allocated and waiting to be used.
Yes, sir. It's prohibited from going into the general fund.
All right. That's my question on item 4. I'm comfortable with voting that forward as a receive and file.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to receive and file by Councilman Vieira, seconded by Councilman Dingfelder. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
The motion carried with Miranda being absent at vote.
Thank you.
Go to item number 5.
So item 5 is the, obviously toward the agenda is the budget. And I don't know if we want to just mention the fact that there was a separation between the budget and the service level agreement going forward.
Yeah, and Andrea Zellman, I just wanted to.
Zellman, excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I mispronounced your name and then I corrected myself. Sorry about that. Yeah.
I've been called worse.
Both movie stars.
Just to be clear, in the last, we don't know how many years, but going back a while, the annual services agreement was embedded in the budget, and so when this agency would approve it, they would approve both at the same time. And given this agency's focus on transparency, and we just thought it would make sense to separate the agreement out and let you see it and make sure that you understand what you're approving, that you're approving the budget. You're also approving separately the services agreement. And if you'd like, did you want me to discuss the services agreement now, or did you want to discuss the budget first? We can go either way.
I would prefer going budget first,
Okay.
but however, whatever this board would like to hear.
It seems like the services agreement should go to item 10. That's part and parcel about what item 10 is.
Sure, Councilman Carlson.
Because it ties into budget. Because it ties into budget. It looks like it's about a $300,000 increase in the services agreement, if I read that correctly, from about 1.4 million to 1.7. Did I say 3 or 4? 3. Do you all know what that difference is?
You have an idea? We're getting that answer for you.
Okay, thank you.
Again, Ed Johnson, CRA Manager for East Tampa. That increase was due in part because we added funding for a request that was made by the Community Advisory Committee to hire, for the city to hire 5 part-time individuals to work in our neighborhood enhancement team that would be directly related to the summer youth program. So as some of these folks are finishing the summer youth program, if we had these 5 part-time positions available, individuals that are at the age level for hiring could be moved into these part-time positions to continue their employment off of the summer campaign. And that was the additional increase.
If I could just say, we'll get into the total agreement later, but I'm just, while you're here, are there, because it's all bunched up in categories without a lot of detail, do we pay other people like that? I assume that the staff payments here were just for the managers and the supervisors. Are there other training personnel or?
Yes, specifically in East Tampa, there are, and this also goes into your service agreement because that's where those dollars are being directly related to. All of the staffing from our East Tampa redevelopment office. In addition to that, we have an environmental detective that we pay for, which is also part of that staffing number. And also there's 4 individuals that are full-time employees that work for our neighborhood enhancement team that is part of our East Tampa Clean team. Those staff members are included in the total budget.
I'll get to this later, but it almost seems like we should have 2 separate agreements. One is to provide a service inside the CRA, and the other is the management of the CRA. So anyway, we can talk about that later.
Right.
Thank you.
Sure.
On item agenda number 6, what is the pleasure of the board? I'm sorry.
Just a procedural question. And Sal, you might need to help on this. I thought procedurally we were approving the budget in October.
Yeah, Salter, this is the budget for October. If you waited till October, you'd have a gap between people doing the work for you, and then you'd have nobody until you approve it in October. So you're approving it today to have the carryover, so you have the staff available on October 1st, because your budget works the same way as the city's budget does. On October 1st, you wouldn't have any staff to help support the CRAs if you waited till October.
So the process is different than the city's budget. Obviously, we're not having a formal public hearing per se to approve this budget.
It is not required under the statutes to have this budget approved the way the city approves its budget.
Okay, because I had about 6 or 7 questions on the budget, but for some reason I thought we were approving it in October, so I was just going to spare you guys my questions, but I'm going to need to ask some of them if we're in fact approving it today.
Councilman Dinkfelder, please proceed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So when I hit a particular CRA issue, I don't know, Mr. Bennett, if you want your people to come up and help you or
We'll
what,
do the best we can.
Okay, always. So in the downtown budget, I'm on page 9. It gets a little vague, and we kind of bumped up against this earlier. It's a lot of money in next year's budget. It says capital improvement projects within the CRA, $4 million, $4.1 million. But that's as detailed as I can find it. So, and that really applies to quite a few of the districts. It's just a little vague in terms of a lack of specificity. Beyond a broad category like that. For example, another one is the Channel District CRA, $6.4 million for infrastructure engineering. That's as detailed as I see it. So I don't know if you have a broad answer to that or
I actually might. I spent the weekend reading the strategic plans for the CRAs, which, like many of you, has been just weeks for me. I think some of that detail that comes from the strategic plan that should migrate to the budget should be a little more specific. And I think that's part of what we're all saying today, is that I think, you know, the lens of this administration, this board, this council needs to start leaning forward into accountability and transparency and some more detail work to get some of these things where we can be more specific. So I don't disagree with you, but how this worked its way to this budget line item in that mode is something we could look forward to working on together.
Yeah. We're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere. I'm comfortable with approving it in a vague fashion like today because, as Sal said, we need to move forward. We need to keep going.
Right.
We can't just stop and have no budget. But with that said, over the next couple of months, perhaps a tweaking of these, incorporating the SAP detail into this would be helpful to know where we're headed. But I will ask Rob specifically, because this one really kind of jumped out at me. In the Channel District, it speaks to $6.4 million for design and engineering for infrastructure and neighborhood improvements, but then it has zero to actually build those improvements. That one really, you know, is like, wow, you know, I'm in the wrong field. I need to go into engineering and design. But anyway.
Yeah, the titling of that has been a wording issue that's been around for a little while. When Bob McDonough was in my position as a CRA manager, he had set up, he did a lot of the front-up work was for doing the design work, and then we were funding it based on our SAP. That number just been carried forward, the same account's been carried forward. It's a term, we're still using it as a whole, as master infrastructure.
So it's a little misleading, and there actually is construction anticipated within that 6.5.
And we were trying to clean that up before this budget, but that window closed in July. So it's a wording issue as more than it is an actual issue.
You'll work with Mr. Bennett to
absolutely
to refine that.
So the $13 million that covers the infrastructure that we're doing for the 9 projects. That's that same number. That's this new set of money coming in. We haven't allocated that, but we haven't also gotten all of the GMPs for all the different segments. So we were estimating at 13 million, it may be higher. So we'd be happy to give you more clarity as it comes available.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I've got similar notes for the various items. Let me see if there's any others.
Then while you're looking for those, Council, can you give us your opinion on this? I know you're eagerly waiting.
Not really an opinion, but given this is my first meeting, I apologize if you all have already been briefed on the recent legislative changes, but something that may give you some reassurance is that one of the things that the legislature added to the CRA statute this year was much more detailed reporting requirements, and some of the things I've heard you say today, I think, will be addressed in the reporting that the CRAs will now have to have with regard to total number of projects started and completed and the estimated cost each year, total expenditures from the fund, the increase in the assessed value of property, total amount expended for affordable housing. That the legislature is now requiring that to be in an annual report each year, so hopefully that will help address some of the questions that you have in the future.
I'm good now, Mr. Chairman. I think Mr. Bennett and I understand each other on this.
Mr. Carlson, Councilman Carlson.
Should we call you Mr. Bennett or Chief Bennett?
Whatever is your pleasure. I'll answer to both.
I like both too.
I can answer to John.
Anyway, I think you're interim right now, right? You're
am.
kind of standing in for it because we have an open position. So I appreciate you doing that, and I appreciate your efforts overall to build collegiality between the two. I think it's important for anybody watching to see that the reason why we're asking a lot of questions, or at least the reason why I'm asking a lot of questions and looking at this, first of all, the public has asked me to look at things and ask a lot of tough questions because they're concerned about how their money's being spent. But I think it's not at all a reflection of any of you all in the room or any of the current city staff or the current mayor. It's more of a reflection of concerns about the past, and they want to make sure that we don't that we don't have any issues going forward. And so I think we're all trying to do that. I think my colleagues, especially ones who have been here a long time, may feel like we're asking too many questions, but I think after we get through a couple of these meetings and we set the guidelines, it should be smooth flowing after that. I think we shouldn't have any of this going forward. The problem is just that we have to ask questions about the system. We have to ask questions about what's underneath, because if whatever was going on in the past, if we approve something that's not right, then that's on us. And I think we have to go, as we said last time I showed the grand jury report, it's not about compliance. It's not even about compliance with the new legislation. It's about setting the strategic direction for what these CRAs should do, setting some guidelines for them, and setting the overall tone above their own strategic action plans. I mean, we should be setting some guidance into how they set those up so that there's some parameters there, and then we should be working with those plans. You know this because you've done this in the county and also in the police force. So I think we're all on the same page with that. It's just going to be difficult getting to that process, and I don't know how we do it since we're a board that operates in the sunshine, but we've got to figure out a mechanism for doing it.
Yeah, those are great comments and well appreciated too, but I'm confident. I met with the managers ahead of this meeting. They're all ready to lean forward, and I heard all the feedback about how we should do the reports, how we should unpack the budget, and most importantly, which is dear to my heart, is aligning it with the strategic action plan and making a strong plan with those items that come up from the community, are vetted by the CACs, and of course reside with you as a board. And I think you hit the nail on the head about the growing pains in the beginning, but they're well worth it. So.
One other quick question. I'm a branding person, and this budget is following exactly the same format as last year and I think several previous years. But in branding, sometimes we combine things that look like they're the same, but there may be different legal entities under it. Just from a legal perspective, the first page says City of Tampa Community Redevelopment Agency, and then the inside has the city seal. What is the legal name of this entity, and is it appropriate to use the city seal? Is because by using that branding, it looks like it's a department of the city. Does it stand alone? Our prior attorney went through all the rules and regulations of how the CRA operates, but from a branding perspective, what's the most legally accurate?
It's Salcedo Legal Department. It's the Community Redevelopment Agency of the City of Tampa. You do not have your own seal. And that was a question that came up at the very beginning in '83, that you may have a seal, you don't have a seal. You're a separate entity, you're a dependent agency under the City of Tampa, but you act independently. When the money and everything comes to you, you make the final decisions. You do not have a seal. And if you want to create one, you certainly can.
So I know this sounds like a nuance, but in branding, I look at things like this. It should say Community Redevelopment Agency of the City of Tampa, not City of Tampa Community Redevelopment, because it looks like a department. You would say City of Tampa Public Works Department or City of Tampa Budget Department. It's Community Redevelopment Agency of the City of Tampa.
Yeah. And this has come up in the past as well, because the mayor's picture used to be in there, and the mayor technically doesn't have a role in how you operate, but that's something that you can deal with. It's your decision how you want to continue going forward with this. It's your decision if you want to create a seal. But it's not the city seal, it's not your seal.
Anything further, Councilman Carlson? Councilman Miranda.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the comment. As I look at this Community Redevelopment Agency of Tampa, but the inside of it, the mayor has nothing to do with this. But she is the mayor, so you have to put, I guess, the seal of the City of Tampa in her picture. But when you look at the board doesn't have that. We're the same board as the City Council, but we have Tampa Community Redevelopment Board of Directors. That's us. In fact, going back in the 70s, it was Mayor Poe who said he didn't want it under his authority. The then attorney, Henry Williams, wanted it under the mayor. And Mayor Poe said, I want that under the council. And that's how it became what it is today. However, branding, look at City of Tampa Water and Tampa Bay Water. There's a lot of confusion there. And that's what what I'm saying, you brand and you understand, and we get calls all the time from New Tampa saying your water this or your water that, or from South Tampa, And sometimes it's our water, sometimes it's their water. But it gets very complicated, so maybe we ought to change our name. The Peoples of Tampa Water. But anyway, I'm just suggesting something. It's got to be done, it's got to be looked at. I drive a Chevy, but I don't drive a Chevy Silverado. It's got a different name on it. Thank you.
Councilman Goods.
No mention, I'm sorry if you have a Chevy Silverado, maybe a Ford Ranger, I should say.
I'm so glad that Charlie's here so we don't have boring meetings.
Well, I want to liven it up a little bit.
But you know, but it's good that you have the legend and you can tell these stories of how things come to pass. You know,
Well, that's just what
you
I'm
know,
thinking.
and I was flipping my pages and Mr. Deanfelder did like that on the page, and everyone's right. If we are the acting body, you know, you talk about branding. You know, we are the council. We don't have our own seal, and that may be something we need to look into the future to where we're a different body. You know, so I kind of concur with Mr. Carlson and Mr. Dingfelder that moving forward, and I guess I can wait to the second portion when we go into management. I got some questions about management, and but I think we may need to look at maybe rebranding it so people can see that distinction. I mean, we are the governing body.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure,
And I'm not suggesting that we get a logo or a new seal or anything like that. I just want to make sure the nomenclature is right and that it's legally correct. But the thing that's important to me, and this will get into maybe a later conversation, but if the mayor proposes something and the city administration comes to us as city council and we approve it, if somebody doesn't like it, we can say we supported the mayor's proposal. In the case of the CRA, the buck stops with us. It completely stops with us. And so we need to make sure that more than even what's going on with everything else we approve, that we know everything that's going on with the CRAs because we're completely responsible for it. And that's what is my motivation for asking all the questions. It's not that I don't trust anybody in staff or the mayor or anybody like that. It's just if the buck stops with me and the rest of you all, I want to make sure that we know.
Councilman Dingfelder.
So we're still on the budget, right? Item 5?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Bennett, one other thing that jumped out at me last night is, and this will actually come in also in item 10, but if we're going to approve the budget now, I need to bring it up now. When I go to the compensation page, which is actually part of the agreement, I don't want to get into the details of the agreement except for the numbers. In the compensation page, it speaks to the contribution from each one of the CRAs to the salaries and operating funds, which is mostly salaries, of the various great folks who are out there in the audience working on the CRA issues. It comes to $1.7 million. My question is, and again, I don't know if this is you or Dennis, is out of that $1.7 million, Mr. McDonough he must have been paid, I guess, incrementally out of each one of these different TIF districts, because I'm not seeing sort of a general administrative category, and which actually brings up another question is we don't have a budget at all, which is kind of interesting, because let's say for argument's sake, what if we wanted to go to a state or national CRA meeting? We as the CRA have no budget, we have no staff per se in terms of, our own issues. So that's sort of tied into the other part of the question, which is, and I hate to bring up Bob McDonough, and I want to give a shout out to Bob McDonough. He worked hard on this for many, many years. He's a good man, and I wish him well. But anyways, in regard to his salary came out of a portion of each one of these, what, pro rata share or something or other?
Yeah, I'll let Mr. Rajero address that. The good news is you're getting me for free right now. It's in the.
You're cheap and easy, huh?
Again, hello, Dennis Rajero, Interim Chief Financial Officer. In contrast to some of the other personnel within the CRA, McDonough's salary was paid half from the CRA and half from the general fund. And in terms of the particular funding sources, it was pulled from, prorated from the various agencies.
So is that the intent, at least today, that program, that salary program for that position, which we haven't filled yet, would continue
Yes.
financially? Is that clear, what my question was?
I believe so, unless I misunderstood.
Yeah, no, I think programmatically, Mr. Harris, we're correct moving into the 2020 budget. But because that position is being sought, I think we're not settled on that yet, so.
Okay. I'm actually glad to hear that it was half and half, because clearly, in the position as Bob filled it, maybe half the time he was working on CRA issues, but the other half he was working on pure city issues.
I believe
so
that
I
was
guess
the
that's
philosophy, yeah.
that's where the split came from. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything further?
It was in, I think, a Times article, and it's public record, but I think the article said that the last person's salary was like 174 or something like that. Is that the total of, so half of that was from the CRA and half of it was from the city budget?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And including benefits. It would, I should say, it would also include benefits, not just the salary.
And Mr. Bennett, can we, through the CRA, can we offer you more than the mayor offered you so we can bring you over instead?
I just want us all to move forward, so
Yes,
whatever that takes. I'm enjoying the interim process in this space so we can all
No, it's good to work
connect
with
it
you.
to
Thank you.
everyday business.
Councilman Goose.
So I'm hoping in the future that we'll be able to indicate that in the budget here. So I'm hoping in the future we'll be able to indicate that in the budget.
Absolutely.
Because I don't see, again, it's not indicated anywhere, and it brings to the question. So hopefully we'll be able to insert that in the future.
I'm used to seeing more line items unpacked, and again, I think that bubbles up from the strategic action plan and maybe an overarching administrative plan as well. I'd have to defer to legal about what Mr. Dingfelder brought up about travel and expenses. I believe there's, and again, I'm going on a limb, I think there's an opportunity to recover that, but I think we also would need to identify that as a space so you can do some of these things and receive the reimbursements for it. Am I correct? I did read that.
Just, the motion on the floor is to, I think, approve the budget, am I correct? So can I just ask which we're talking about this document, but minus pages 50 through 59, that's the service agreement? We're not approving the service agreement, we're only approving the budget? Is that correct?
We pulled the service agreement out. just
So
to
it's
make
not,
it more clear
I may
to
have
you.
an older copy of it, but it's not this document without the agreement. Okay. Should we vote?
You know, I would feel more comfortable if Councilman Dingfelder was in here so he could also cast his vote. He had a lot of questions concerning this budget in item agenda number 5. Please, if you would, Chief. Right.
I was dealing with item 10, but go ahead.
Sidebar is a sidebar, and that's no problem, but of course, you did have a lot of comments, and I just wanted to make sure that your vote was heard.
I appreciate it.
We have a motion on item agenda number 5 for the budget. We have a motion to approve by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Vieira. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
The motion carried unanimously.
Now, one more thing before you go out and have another sidebar, Councilman. We are approaching the 12 o'clock hour. I foresee maybe the next 1, 2, or 3 to be going along very quickly. However, we do have items 3 and 10, which is part of a workshop. Anybody would like to make some sort of motion on our break?
I say we take care of 6, 7, 8, and 9, and then break at 12 or 12:15, whatever we need, and then come back at 1 for items 10 and 3, since they're probably going to be lengthy.
Is everyone acceptable to that?
And I probably have to break around 2:15 or so. We should be out by then, but just.
So breaking at 12, coming back at 12:45? Is that agreeable to everyone?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, fine. Let's hear item number 6 then, please. Or what is it? What is the board's? Excuse me. I'm sorry, Chief. Item number 6.
Yep. So, I think we have a presentation for you. Get out of the way.
Good morning, Chair Seacher and board members. Michelle Van Loan, Economic and Urban Development, and also the Facade Grant Coordinator. Before I go into 6 and 7, I just want to address some of the questions earlier about the facade. At the last meeting, you did request that we review some of the tenets and criteria for the program and that we research it and look at other options. We have been going back to our CACs and researching what is done in other facade grant programs across the United States. We just did not have enough time to do all of that, especially going back to our CACs, given the Labor Day holiday before you met today. It is on our agenda, and we're scheduled to come back to you in October to address some of those ideas and the feedback from our CACs. Additionally, at the last meeting, you did tell us to move forward with what was in the pipeline. The 3 that are on your agenda today had already been submitted and were in the works. They are the last ones in the pipeline, and we do not currently have any additional applications that have been submitted since these 3. So with that, if there are any questions, I'll go ahead with item number 6.
Any questions?
So our first one on the Elmo page is in East Tampa, and I'll try and get a better picture. This is the old Perfecto Garcia cigar factory. It has been vacant for more than 20 years. We do have a new owner. The new owner is in the process of right now doing emergency repairs, and I'll switch to this picture that shows it a little bit more directly. You can also see that tower. Most people are familiar with the tower. They are trying in their first phase to do everything they can to prevent any further water intrusion because of these windows being so old and those shutters. If they don't do something imminently soon, those walls will start collapsing. So the first phase is to put in new windows and then also the shutters. And you can see on that bottom where those shutters are all at ground level and then at that first floor of windows. They are also pursuing grants from the county and historic preservation in order to do a lot of this project. This building is very old. It has been left to decay for a very long time, and all of these different resources are needed to make this project happen. The current facade grant is just for those shutters that you see. It is on 3 sides of the building, 3 very long sides, as you can tell by this picture. To do all the shutters, they are separately doing all the windows, and they did receive a preliminary grant from the county, and they've already done the restoration of the tower and the concrete foundation for that water tower.
Any questions? Councilman Maniscalco.
So with this specific facade grant, I mean, we can see $200,000 owner investment, $50,000 from us. But since the topic of historic preservation and cigar factories has come up in the last month or so, this is a perfect example of we're preserving our history. They're looking at other grants, but they're doing what is right to maintain this building, as important as it is to our community. Something that's been shuttered for 20 years. I think it's being put to good use, the money, and they're doing their part. It's not even matching. I mean, they're doing $200,000 to the $50,000. So.
Any other questions? Councilman Carlson.
Earlier I said I wouldn't vote on any more facade grants, but thank you for letting us know these are the last 3 in the pipeline. This is the kind of thing I think we should be investing in or helping, and I would put it under historic preservation instead of a facade grant. But I would support this as a project standing alone, assuming that you've gone through it.
Any other questions?
Second.
We have a motion to approve the resolution. Item number 6, motion was made by Councilman Vieira, seconded by Councilman Goods. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
The motion carried unanimously.
Item 7 is a facade grant from Drew Park. This is a little building, again, that has been vacant for a couple of years at 4407 North Clark. Their request is $21,368. I'll try and get you that picture a little bit better now there. You can see how it's been overgrown, the whole front. They've lost any semblance of asphalt in the front. On the south side of the building, trees have completely, and brush, have overgrown that entire area. That paint has long been gone. So the new owner is going to be completely cleaning up the front. That rusted old fence and gate will be replaced. The whole front will be redone, both on the building and in the landscaping and the parking, adding lighting, and they will completely turn it into a stucco, so it will have a little bit more weather resistance than the wooden siding it currently has now.
What kind of business is that?
He's going to be doing training for plumbers.
Oh, okay.
Second.
All right, jumping item agenda number 7, resolution, moved by Councilman Vieira, seconded by Councilman Goods. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Was anyone opposed? Yes.
The motion carried with Carlson voting no.
Thank you, and Ebor's coming up next.
Thank you, Michelle. Hello, everyone. I'm Brenda Thrower. I'm with Ybor City Development Corporation, and I pretty much manage the program, the facade program in that district. I'm sorry, this is not showing. I'm here with the historic facade of the German American Club. If you know a little bit about the German American Club, it's a social club. We don't have many in Ybor City, but this is one of them. It closed down, probably none of you remember when it was operating, maybe some do, but it's over 100 years old. It was where the Germans had their social club, but after World War I, when there was citywide hatred of Germans, they closed down. Their membership went way down, and it ended up pretty much being a vacant building. There's a couple other uses that went into it. The Tampa Labor Temple was in it, the Young Men's Hebrew Association, an insurance company at some point, and in 1990, the city of Tampa moved into it. And I know it well because it was my office. So it was renovated slightly in 1990, but the building, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Here, I'll show you some, actually, let me give you a better picture. This is the historic building. It's on the corner of Palm and Nebraska. And then here is the building today, okay, of where it sits. Now, from the outside of this building, it looks fine, right? But it's not. It's got a problem. It's got several problems. It's got something called spalling concrete, and I've got some up-close pictures because I know it came up, Councilman Dingfelder asked about. If you look up close and you have to go around the building, there's crumbling concrete that's coming off the sides of the windows, in part of the brick. Here's one right here. Can you see this one? That's what's happening throughout the building. And here's another one. Here, looking up, I'm sorry, these are my black and white photographs. I didn't know if I was going to get this detail today, but this is what the owner brought to us. And so for several years, and here's some more pictures, and I've got all these as part of the file if you want to see them up close. This building sat vacant. It's been vacant for several years. We, being in economic development, we're trying to get developers to take a look at it. We had some prominent developers look at it, and they all turned away. Finally, there was one developer in partnership with Metro Charities, which is located on 7th Avenue, and they partnered up with Can Developers. They purchased the property, and they partnered up with some private developers to now turn it into an inclusive healthcare clinic. Many of you went to or several of you went to the groundbreaking, and I find this an interesting story because, you're going from an institution that was discriminatory or had discrimination against them to one that's being completely inclusive. And this is part of a bigger project. I'll show you, let me show you this one first. It is going to be Metro Wellness Clinic. This is the historic building, can you see that? And then next to it, they're building on an addition, which they will be removing a interstate sign there. When we do these facade grants, we only put money into the, at least in Ybor, we only do historic preservation. Most of the projects, I can't even think of one that wasn't involving a historic building. We also look at the sides of the building, which we're not gonna do all 4 sides. They'll come in and give me a budget saying, okay, this is my facade budget. Well, we actually prorate it so that it has to be visible from the public right-of-way. So the only sides we're funding in this is the east and the south side. You've seen many that have come before you. We've done it on the Centro Storiano where we only did 2 sides or 3 sides to that building. I didn't even consider the one that was facing the west. But so the budget for them is way beyond. I'm just going to give you the facade budget because that's all really we're considering today. But it's about $116,000, and we are funding. They're eligible for the full 50. The actual facade of the entire building was over 200, but we only looked at 116 of it because of the 2 sides. And they're putting in 83,000. The project is much larger than this, as you know. It's going to be millions of dollars that are being invested into our community. Any questions?
Councilman Maniscalco.
Just a few comments, and you said it. It began as a community resource, and it's coming back to serving the community. Not in the same capacity, you go from mutual aid, German American Club to what it is now. But when the whole TVX discussion came up in 2015, people were worried, because people asked me, with the potential widening of the interstate and the express lanes, what was going to happen to that building? The plans have changed, things have changed over the last 4 years. But I'm glad to see that this building is being preserved, because to build something like that today would be over budget. Nobody, Centro Studiano, Cuban Club, Italian Club. So going back to, this is a community asset. It's being given back essentially to the community that is going to benefit a wide range of individuals. And when it comes to the facade grant, it makes sense to support something like this because, again, historic preservation and something that is essentially giving back to the people.
Councilman Goods? No. Councilman Carlson?
Again, in light of the fact that this is the last one of this series before we change the rules, and that it's historic preservation, I've looked at a lot of this building, and I think it's important to preserve it also. I would put this in the category of a historic preservation grant instead of facade grant, but I would support it because it's an important building to preserve.
Ms. Thoreau, thank you very much for this report. One last comment before I entertain a motion. My brother at the end might also remember that this was a Masonic lodge at one time. And I'm glad to see that we don't have to worry about FDOT wanting to tear this great building down. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Councilman Maniscalco regarding the resolution, item number 8, seconded by Councilman Miranda. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion carried unanimously.
Item number 9.
Mr. Chairman, just as a point of order. So as I was going through item number 9, and specifically the actual contract that I wanted to talk to Ms. Zellman about, there were some legal issues and that I wanted to address, and things that, frankly, in light of our time constraints and everything, that was my, quote, sidebar conversation that I had with staff. I said, if we defer this for a month so I can get my questions answered, do they have any heartburn with that in regard to, the overall project?
I wouldn't mind. I don't know about the rest of the board. We've got about 5 minutes, and it seems like you want to postpone this. Can you ask the same questions you asked them so we fully understand, so we might back you on that postponement?
Well, frankly, my preference is to defer it a month because there's also some engineering and drawings that I hadn't had a chance to review in my initial packet. Now I'm seeing that they have been included. I apologize, Rob. But last night I didn't have a chance to look at them. So staff tells me there's no harm in deferring that, and I'll be glad to share my questions with council or with this body next month. But that's my preference, is to continue it for 1 month. And staff indicated they didn't have a problem with it.
I'll second that.
May I speak?
Mr. Rosner.
I was just speaking with our client's attorney there. The tie to this is still, the demolition is about to occur, and some of these things are tied to it, but not 100% tied to it. So the new construction work is not tied directly to it, but there are a handful of the demolition portion that's coming up that could possibly impact it. So if we could answer some of the questions today, that'd be great. If not, I mean, we can defer, but there was.
Yeah, I mean, I understand they might want it to be approved today, but frankly, my question's probably gonna take a half hour or so. And that's without even me having a chance to look at the details. So that's my preference. I think you have a motion in a second.
Let me ask, can that be done during the break, or is that your questions, or?
During my lunch break?
I'll give you my 45 minutes then.
Just.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, and I think I would also suggest maybe we asked
Yes.
the applicant.
Yes, can we hear from the applicant, please?
They're not an applicant. They're
Excuse me, could I ask, could we hear from the grant
Marilyn Healy,
request?
representing ALV. I would respectfully ask you to reconsider deferring, and here's why. This project's been ongoing for a long time, and the city came to us about a couple months ago and asked the developer if they could include this work in their demo and all of that, because it makes a lot of sense from a cost and timing standpoint. We have worked with the Straz to stay away from their Broadway season, which becomes in earnest early November. If this gets delayed yet another month, it's going to push all our construction contracts back. Our permitting is going to be pushed back, and we're going to be really in a tight squeeze. So I know that this comes back before City Council on the 19th for the development agreement part of it. Excuse me. I was hoping that maybe we could get your questions answered between now and then so that the whole project wouldn't be delayed. So respectfully, I'd ask you to reconsider or
All right.
address everything in the
If council,
DA.
if that's what council's preference is, I'll fire away.
Thank you.
Anybody on this board doesn't mind taking an extra 15 minutes so we can hear the questions that Councilman Dingfelder has to ask, and then we can make our decisions on whether or not we want to vote for the motion?
I don't have an issue.
Councilman Dingfelder, please proceed.
Okay. In regard to the resolution, it says the agreement is between American Land Ventures LLC, but then when I go over to the actual agreement, it says that the agreement is between the CRA and ALV Residences on the River LLC. There seems to be an inconsistency between the resolution. I told you guys would hate this. Between the resolution,
correct, yeah.
between the resolution and the agreement.
The agreement's correct. My apologies if it's.
Okay,
if
so the resolution needs to be changed?
We can amend it, yes.
Okay. How did we come up with this dollar amount, $1.147 million, when later in the actual agreement or document itself, it says we don't really know what the dollar amount's gonna be? There seems to be an inconsistency there.
Okay, for this project, we were estimating what the Riverwalk improvements were going to be. We had approached and said, hey, while you're out there doing this work, could you go ahead and add this extra work so with the disturbances much less, we can get all the improvements done once so we don't have to.
Well, my question is specific.
Yes.
Is somewhere in this agreement I read last night, it says we really don't know exactly what the dollar amount's gonna be. But then we come up with this amount of 1.147 plus $100,000 contingency.
Correct.
So do we know or we don't know? Is this a number that our estimators have come up with?
Yes, it's an estimate.
This is the number that we would pay if we were doing it ourselves.
probably we'd pay more because we're not having to pay additional mobilization costs. We wouldn't have to go through as long of a procurement process. We'd be saving in a lot of other ways, as well as the disturbance community and getting these other things done, so we won't have to tear up something that has been recently done to add the other things.
All right, well, that leads to my next question. In section 4 of the contract itself, it says funding will only be for actual costs of the Riverwalk infrastructure improvements as properly documented by the developer to the satisfaction of the agency at its sole discretion. Alternatively, if the improvements are greater than 1.147 million, the city and the agency shall amend the agreement as follows. And then, so my next question is, do they get to pay themselves for, is this just out-of-pocket expenses that total to 1.147? Or do they pay themselves for, being the GC on this segment, and therefore they could add an extra 10% for their own construction efforts for this project, and then come back to us and say, we actually need more?
That was a long question, so let me break it down. It was intended to be an estimated amount. It includes the design to go with that. So in that respect, it's like design build. With what we did with SPP, we didn't know how much was going to cost to redo everything, so they had a big idea of $100 million. We're metering that out as the projects are known to us. So when phase 1, stage 2, they came and said, we did this design, we think it's $9.8 million, then we approved that, then they went through that. That's basically what this is, but in a single estimate. We think it's going to cost $450,000. We got some estimates for how much it would cost for the engineering for doing that, and asked them to carry that, and we would do this as reimbursement as we do with some other.
But my specific question is, do they get to pay themselves? In other words, we've come up with 1.147 million as an estimate. Is that pretty much just a pass-through amount, or do they get to pay themselves as the GC for this? And the reason I ask it is this benefits them too. I mean, they're the ones who are building the condo project adjacent to it. So and they're agreeing to do this, so I can't help but assume that this benefits them. But do they get to pay themselves?
Yeah, they would be able to pay for their soft costs that go along with managing the project, just as we would have our own soft costs.
Okay, because that's not spelled out necessarily in here.
They would be included in these costs. The estimate not included just straight construction. That would be an estimated contract cost that we would have. We would have to pay general conditions and the normal stuff that you have to pay for any contractor. So
Okay.
yes, those soft costs would be there.
All right.
Are they paying themselves to administer this? Not specifically. They're doing this as part of the total, but they're also doing the entire roadway project in the same sense. So we're just basically adding this as an add alternate to that roadway project.
So you're saying that they're not eligible to pay themselves the administrative costs of managing this portion?
No, I'm saying, just like every other contract, a construction contract, the contract manager would be paying themselves to manage it and buy out contracts and all the things that they do as a GC.
But that's included in the 1.147
Yes.
estimate? Okay.
Yes.
How about dispute resolution? You go into, this is on page 3 and page 4 of the contract itself. Typically, these contracts speak to dispute resolution.
Mm-hmm.
Often they refer the parties to mediation and arbitration.
Mm-hmm. What's your question?
It's not there.
This is approval for funding. Again, the final agreement was supposed to come through the next meeting.
No, this is a contract between the CRA and this organization
understand the question
that
now.
Ms. Healy is representing. I'm reading from the contract. I don't see a dispute resolution paragraph.
Could you help with us?
Mr. Dingfelder, I apologize. This contract predated me, and I believe Mr. Torito left the room to update
Yes.
the resolution, and I assume he would have an answer for that question. So I apologize that I can't answer it.
Okay, well, maybe I guess we can defer it to after lunch. And I'll try and get my other questions answered during lunch, Mr. Vieira. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if we could defer it till after lunch, I'll talk to Mr. Torito about the contract itself.
We're used to working lunches.
Councilman
I
Carlson.
just have one quick question. Why, I know this is one of the last mayor's favorite projects. Why isn't the money, why didn't the money come out of his budget and the city budget instead of the CRA budget?
Well, this project was one of the many things that the CRA was planning to do, and we're trying to basically, take the advantage of the already mobilization and the work being done that's related to this for the same reasons I mentioned earlier. So this would have been a CRA project regardless if that project was being done.
How much is the city, sorry, how much is the city paying for the roadway changes around this to create this property?
Approximately 6 million? Does that sound right to you? I think the entire here comes Sal.
So we're getting paid about 6 million, we're paying the developer 6 million? Is that right?
That's what it costs to build the roadway
And then
and
another,
do all the
and then
work
another,
to realign everything and to
So we-
reroute traffic and all the things and remove utilities.
so about 6 million for that, about another, what was this, 1.1? 1.4, and then I think the developer paid the city about 4 million for the property.
I think it was 4.5, yeah.
So net, we're paying them to take the property and develop it, is that right? We're paying about 7.1 million, and they paid us 4. That means, in effect, we paid them 3.1 to develop a piece of property that we owned, is that right?
Approximately, yes, but this is all roadway infrastructure. They're doing it on our behalf.
And these deals are done, and I'm not trying to undo any of them, but these are the kinds of deals that people call me about every day and say, were these deals done in the last 8 years? And why would the city be paying a developer at $3.1 million or whatever to develop a property that I think should have gone to the Straz Center, which is what it was originally intended to do. But this is the kind of thing we need to change going forward, and this is the reason why I'm asking so many questions.
Property values have changed, and the values of the roadway and construction's changed. And during this whole process, one of the things that really we identified, and that's what came up before, was realigning McGinnis to be at the full grid instead of the offset that was the original design. So that was part of that 6 million was the 945 that we were doing to take down the annex, and that was a planned thing that came up in April.
So I believe there's a question that was asked that needed your expertise. Councilman
Yes.
Dingfelder, if you'd like to rephrase that question or.
Dispute, he was asking questions about the dispute.
I was in the elevator, so I apologize for not hearing it. There's a question about this is Altitude Legal Department. Go ahead, I'm sorry, I asked the question. I was in the elevator, so I didn't hear it.
Yes, no problem, sir. On the last page of the agreement, of the draft agreement, it does all the standard language, assignment and attorney's fees and costs and that sort of thing. There's no dispute resolution clause. I think I often see dispute resolution clauses in our contracts, referring the parties to mediation or arbitration or what have you.
Right. The reason we didn't put it in there is that because we have the final word on any disputes, we do not give them any, if there's the provision in there talks about we don't give them any of the funding until the city has approved it. So there shouldn't be a dispute because we have the final word on any of those items coming up. That's why we didn't think it was necessary.
Yeah, but the problem with that is if they do dispute it, then there's no recourse except to go to circuit court.
That's correct, yes.
And that's the preference? I mean, I don't know. It just seems a little harsh to me. I mean, staff's talking about we don't want to delay the project, and then all of a sudden if there's a dispute, then we got to go to circuit court. That might delay the project.
Okay, if there's any dispute, it'll be a dispute on them getting paid, and the project will have been completed because they don't get paid until they've finished the project, and we pay them as the project gets completed. I understand your concern. We didn't put it in there. We didn't think it was necessary in this particular case.
Okay. And I had one other big picture question, I guess, Mr. Carlson. I'm glad you raised that, Bill. Bill, what bothers me, one of the things that bothers me about this project is that apparently, with all due respect to the three gentlemen who were here, apparently this item came sort of as a Hail Mary pass on the last session before we were sworn in, the four of us. I don't think that's right. And I don't blame the three of you. You guys are just on the receiving end of the pass. but in regard to the fact that it was sort of a lame duck type thing to do, when I read about it in the newspaper, I just thought, that's not right. You know, so perhaps that's one of the reasons that I've looked at this with a very careful eye. Mr. Carlson, you said it's a done deal. But then I just heard the attorney for the developers say that there's an item coming back on the 18th. I wasn't even aware of that. 19th? I wasn't even aware of that. What is that item? How important is that item? Have you guys been briefed on this in regard to that? The Strauss folks don't like this project. They think that it's never been a good project or a good location in regard to the city. So legally, I don't know where we are on this.
Well, just on that comment, Mr. Dingfelder.
And I did say with all due respect.
I understand with all due respect to yourself also, the Strads never complained about it directly. In fact, I think, if I remember correctly, they sent a notice approving it, but I'm not certain, because that's maybe somebody else can understand that.
Are you finished?
Yes.
Councilman Carlson.
They didn't, because the last mayor went to the board meeting and stood there and stared them down while they voted on it, and it's despicable.
I wasn't there, so I don't know when that.
Yeah, I'm just telling you, this is the kind of.
That's an opinion, correct?
Okay, that's an opinion, but I got the reports of, and it's not. Here's the problem we're facing is that this property has changed hands, I think, at least at one time. And it's not the fault of the current developers, and the city has to stay to whatever commitments were made in the past. The point that I'm making is that this was this was property that was discovered by the Strat Center. They proposed to develop it to benefit them, and the last mayor grabbed it out of their hands and did a sweetheart deal on development for this. We're paying the developers to do this. It's crazy that deals like this were done over and over and over again, and we've got to shine a light. It makes me want to throw up. How possibly were these deals done? I don't understand.
Legal.
My only suggestion, I understand that Ms. Healy's not representing an applicant per se, but we are talking about a legal agreement, and she's representing the other party to the agreement. And I think it's only fair. It looks to me like she's chomping at the bit to address some of your comments.
She's talking to Sal.
So I would suggest that you give her the opportunity to do that.
To at least rebuttal?
My apologies, I posed a procedural question, that's what they're discussing. My misunderstanding on something. So, one moment.
Where the confusion is coming is who's the agreement with. I'm not sure anything has to come back. This agreement in of itself may be complete. Is the CRA paying for this particular project? Now, if the development agreement has to come back, and I apologize, I have not seen a separate agreement beside this one which was sent to me. This I saw as a funding mechanism, not necessarily as a construction agreement. If that has to come back to you on the 19th, I'll have to see that because I have not seen that document yet. All I've seen is this agreement agreeing to have the CRA pay X number of dollars for a particular project. That's what I've seen.
Councilman Dingfelder.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I had a little heartburn voting for the budget earlier is because it included this line item, $1.147 million. But I went ahead and voted for the budget knowing that we'd be addressing this item 9. Are you saying, this is an agreement, as I read it on its face, between the CRA and that private developer. Are you saying we don't need to approve it?
No, what I'm saying is where the confusion's coming up, and until I heard it just now, I didn't know there was a confusion, so I apologize for that. If you approve this, it's the funding source. My suggestion is that if you want to approve this document, it's a funding source that will never go forward until you have a chance to look at the agreement that comes back to you on the 19th. Excuse me.
So it's contingent on the 19th.
It's right.
What is coming on the 19th?
I have not seen what's coming on the 19th because I was not aware there was another agreement coming forward. I was given this to review, I put it together, I came to you with the funding source. I have not seen an agreement with the city.
So maybe the option is, we theoretically could approve this,
Contingent.
but not give it to them to sign it.
The option would be you could approve this, the reason that I didn't want to hold it up for the next CRA meeting. If you approve this contingent upon the other agreement coming before you, if the other agreement comes before you and you for some reason do not want to approve it, then this is null and void.
The only other provision that I wanted to speak to, Mr. Chairman, is item 7.7, Sal, speaks to assignment. It says the developer shall have the absolute right to assign this agreement to an entity which is owned, managed, or controlled by the principals of ALV Residences on the River LLC without further consent by the city. An absolute assignment provision like that, to me, is a little unusual. I don't know who the principals are when we sit here today. I'm going to bet $100 you don't know who the principals are of ALV Residences on the River, and yet we're saying if those principals decide to set up another company and take over this contract, they can. So I found that a little unusual.
My feeling on this was they're going to, if they're not going to do the work themselves and they're going to have someone else do the work, that's okay as long as it's affiliated with the group that's actually contracting with us. That was my thought behind this. If you have a problem with that, fine, you can bring that up. But I didn't have a problem with that provision.
All right. Well, like I say, if you want to move this forward, Mr. Chairman, contingent upon on the 19th vote, that's your
Mr.
prerogative.
Chairman,
Yes, Councilman Goods.
I want to hear from the attorney from the group.
And I was just going to ask Ms. Healy, do you want to have any rebuttal?
I want to hear from her.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any rebuttal?
Well, I hate to say it like a rebuttal, but we have this agreement that you were looking at as part of your package that's supposed to come up on the 19th.
I don't
have
that agreement.
I thought he was reading from it.
No, I was reading from the contract that's in front of us today. I don't know what's coming in front of us on the 19th.
It should be the same thing. You have a,
I think with the disconnect that's coming, this should have been a three-way agreement, not a two-way agreement. That would have resolved the issues. This should have been an agreement between CRA for the funding, the city for the actual contract. That is not how it was prepared. So if you approve this today, it really isn't going to serve any purpose. The CRA is going to have to prove it at some point anyway. So my suggestion is, if you're comfortable with that, sign this agreement, approve this agreement today. When we come back then, it'll be a three-way agreement. I'm trying to avoid having to come back a second time to the CRA. You're still in control of the process. You either control of it as the CRA or as the city council. If you don't approve it as the city council, it goes nowhere. But I think that was where the disconnect came up as I'm looking through the process. It should have been a three-way agreement. Because the CRA is paying for it, but the city is actually entering into the agreement for the other portions.
So
And I think
it
that's where the
is
disconnect
confusing. But
It's
if
confusing to me too, I understand that.
So the way I understand, the way I look at it, it should have came before council first and then come to the CRA for approval of dollars for a facade, versus coming for a facade first and still coming back on our 19th. So
you approve the funding, and then as city council, you approve the development agreement, infrastructure agreement.
Ms. Healy, didn't I understand earlier that there were time constraints? That
Yes,
there has
sir.
to be demolition done, so is demolition going to be done before it comes back to city council?
No, I
On
think
the 19th.
with some minor changes, which we can talk about here in a few minutes outside, that agreement can come to city council on the 19th.
Thank you. Anything further, Ms. Healy?
Sal, Julie, let me just explain it one more time, and I apologize for this mix-up. What we can do is come back after the break, have an agreement that's a three-way contract that resolves these issues. If there's anything else you think you see the need, but right now, if I come back with this resolution being a three-way agreement between the CRA, the city, and this organization, that will resolve the first issue. The city will still have to approve it later on, and if for some reason you're not happy with that, that'll kill the project because it requires the three parties to sign it. That may be the easiest way to resolve the confusion.
When you say kill the project, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, when you say kill the
Well-
project, you mean kill this small part?
I didn't mean that. This agreement that we have with this organization to do the work for us.
Right.
You have to pay for it, which the CRA will do, and then we have to have the city go along and approve it to go ahead with the work. And by doing it that way, you have two bites of the apple, same group, two bites of the apple. So you're not holding it up today if you approve this portion, but on the 19th, if that's your decision, then this portion will go away, not
From
kill
a
the
legal
project.
perspective, do we have any opportunity to kill this project, period?
No, you do not. That was a poor choice of words. We will just not have them doing the work for us on the Riverwalk if this portion does not get approved. The project's already been approved.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further questions? We have business still left. There is a motion duly made and seconded. Unless the motion maker wants to withdraw their motion on deferring this to our next meeting.
What is the motion that you?
To defer this, you're actually what you suggested.
Oh, I thought he said defer it until after lunch.
I understand, but we still have the motion that was on the floor that you made, that someone else made on behalf of you. So I want to know if the person who made the motion, which I believe was Councilman Goods, wants to remove that motion, or if he wants to make it stand and we vote on it.
Well, since we can't kill the whole project, which would be my preference.
Councilman Dingfelder.
Then I'm answering your question.
No, because the motion was made by Councilman Goods.
Well, then what'd you ask?
I was asking the board. Wow. Forgive me, okay. All right, Councilman Dingfelder, this was brought up by you. Do you want to remove?
No, my questions,
the motion
thank you
was
for your
made?
time today. My questions have been answered my questions have been answered. So I'm okay with you, if y'all want to vote today.
Let me break the dialogue.
Thank you.
I make a motion, we approve this project based on the three-party agreement coming on the 19th at City Council. No? Worded in a nicer way.
My suggestion is that you continue this until after lunch, when I'll bring the three-party agreement back to you,
Okay.
and then you can vote on, the CRA can vote on it, and then when it comes back to the city council, the city,
All
you
right.
sitting in city council can vote on
I move to hold
it.
till after lunch.
When do we come back then?
Well, since we went over a little, just to come back at 1. Word reset.
At 1. Want to make a